All right, here we go. We're back with another weekly dosing episode of Sheep Farm Podcast. This is episode 207. Format is simple. I'm getting used to saying this now. I don't even need the notes to say it with. We're trying to release four. I might need some notes. We're trying to release a minimum of 4 shows a month. Members get full podcast plus download. Non-members get part one. All new shows are released on Saturdays, round about lunchtime-ish. Depends when your lunchtime is. Podcasts are always available at sheepfarm.co.uk. That's sheepfarm.co.uk. We also put part one out on Podomatic. They also send them out to Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, Google. Not Google now, actually. I mentioned that before. I need to stop mentioning that because I don't think Google Podcasts exist anymore. It's YouTube Podcasts.
All right.
And Apple as well. Yeah, I've actually put the last couple on YouLube as well. This is Sheep Lube. They seem to, if we're careful in part one, we seem to get away with it. Part two, we talk about what we want. So
yeah,
But part one, sometimes, I mean, the one we did with Mark the other week, total waste of time. No, not Mark, Nathan, I think it was. Total waste of time. But that they got banned straight away.
Yeah.
But anyway, so Odyssey, we've got a sheep farm on Odyssey as well, and on Rumble. Although there's nothing being uploaded on Rumble that much. Matrix, I did do a sneaky Matrix the other week. If anybody saw it, for about an hour. I was going to stop doing those, then I decided to do one for an hour. There you go. Although I've had a bit of. One of my backup hard drives has gone rat shit, and I had stored on there literally hundreds and hundreds of a library of videos from going back through the ages on YouTube, and it's gone a bit funky, so I'm going to have to... I didn't back up my backup. So that's where I get a lot of my resources from for the Matrix stuff. Please subscribe to the website for email notifications and shows, or join us on Instagram. That's totally free. Nobody's getting charged for joining us on Instagram or signing up for emails. Thanks for ordering the vitamins from my website. Remember, use the promo code. I don't get involved in all that Black Friday nonsense and sales. You just get a straight 25% discount all year round. How about that one? It's a Karamak Friday all year. We did have we did. I did. We were going to launch. It's interesting. I did mention this in the podcast, I think, Chris. We did. We were going to launch a new product called a collagen product, which had got type 1 and type 3 collagen.
Just tell me. I can't remember if you mentioned it at all.
I don't know anyway. I'll mention it again, but because it trips into something else I want to talk about. And we got a pallet of collagen delivered in these sacks to deliver to the because it was the first order. I got it delivered to us first. A good job I did, actually, and to deliver to the manufacturer. And we were just writing the labels up, getting the labels done, etc., etc. And when the Bovia thing broke a couple of weeks ago, we decided to ask the manufacturer if there were Bovia in the collagen products, because it's obviously from beef, bovine parts. And they came back with an answer that meant we had to send it all back, because they said it comes from all around Europe, and because can't guarantee basically that it is or it isn't, which is no good for me, because I know if we, from a personal perspective, I don't want to eat it, but also I know if we did package it, that people who are listening are on the ball with all this stuff. They would be questioning us, and if I can't give a straight answer, what's the point of having the damn stuff? Not for a product. I'm not that interested in selling certain products. If I can't, there will be products out there, so I will find one eventually. And when this settles down, there'll be companies saying ours hasn't and ours has. But the irony is, this company went all out in the statement, basically saying that it had been used in the food chain or from cows since 2021 in Europe.
I was just about to say that to you, because this whole thing's happened instantly, hasn't it? Do you know what I mean? It was mentioned, and then it's instant. So it was already happening, wasn't it?
Yes. There's a bigger plan in action here. For me, this is another. If you look at the farmers protesting in London at the moment, stop people eating beef. People like us who don't want to stop eating beef. I mean, I don't eat beef for other reasons, but people who want to go on carnivore diets and all this type of stuff, they're trying to stop people to want you to eat the bugs
and
all
just getting the collagen.
And getting the collagen as well. Yeah, the goodness. So it's a way of cleverly using big agra, big chem, whatever.
Well, put it like this: I don't eat red meat, but now I give it to my daughter, and her favourite's spag bol. You know,
Yeah.
I think I don't know. It might. Well, I don't know if I'm right or wrong. I ain't got a clue. But
I know she had a fillet steak when she came up here. She likes to eat it better than your house.
I like it. She'll eat a man-sized steak, like an 8-ounce steak. I don't eat it, but I think, and I might be wrong. I'm sure someone will slag me off for saying this, but I think that kids maybe, if they do need them kind of vitamin, whatever. So I'm not bothered.
Nutrients.
Even I don't eat it, but I do give it to my child. She, you know, she doesn't eat tons of meat, but she eats. I think that high-fat mincemeat as well. Is good for her, isn't it?
Do you make mincemeat, or is it mincer meat?
Thick as mincemeat.
Yeah, but thick as mincemeat. Yeah, so it's interesting, really, where this falls through, because if you think of beef products, how it all falls through, yogurts and all this type of stuff. Muller rice are involved.
Cheese.
The Muller dairies are involved in that. But I was listening to a podcast with a farmer on it, who was an Arla farmer. Interesting podcast, and he was actually saying that only 30 farms in the UK are involved. So it's not every Arla farmer and every arm. Yeah. So it's a trial. Now, whatever trial means, they had trials in 2021, didn't they?
But they've scared everyone to death, and no one actually knows any real details about it.
Yeah, because they know that most people don't look into it. Obviously, people listening, they do scratch below the surface. But it's pointless saying, I'm not going to drink Arla if you need milk, for instance. It's certain dairies that are doing it. As I mentioned, I think last week, organic can't use that food additive.
Right, but also I saw one the other day, and it showed an organic one with an Arla thing on it. I mean...
but Arla do have organic dairies.
I know what you mean.
Yeah,
I know what you mean.
Which confuses everybody.
But it's more confusion, isn't it?
To be certified organic, you can't use food additives.
Yeah. Well, this one said
feed
organic,
additives,
then it had Arla on the bottom of it. I've not really... I don't know. What do you do? I don't know.
Arla is a cooperative. Yeah. Arla is a cooperative owned by the farmers, ironically.
Yeah, a lot of them are now. The one I get my milk from, that's a cooperative. And, you know, it's under X farms, but it's loads of different farms.
And I've not done it, but I'll guarantee if you go to the board of directors, none of them are like the farmers. The board of directors that run it will be like these board of directors that run the charities. They will be all WEF nonsense, global climate warming change bollocks, yada, yada, yada.
Just grab them all into
pink hair, etc. Yeah. But yeah, anyway. So we didn't sell the collagen because of that. And it were an interesting video. I forget the chap's name that did the video with him from down south. A really good video. One of them guys who goes into the local councils and sits there listening to all council meetings videoing it.
Right, yeah.
Interesting chap. I every now and again, my mate's a sports therapist. I think he saw you, didn't he? Chris, my mate. Yeah. He came up and gave me a treatment yesterday. Give me some neck bending and all that type of stuff. I'm feeling the effects today. Put it that way. I feel like I've been 5 rounds, or it's first rugby game at season, and day after.
So you not only watch muscly men covered in oil, you also get a personal massage.
Yes. Only people who don't train say muscly.
What do you mean?
I never use that term.
Did I just say muscly?
Yeah. People who don't train always say muscly. I've never used that term in my life.
That's not a real word, is it? Actually, muscular.
Not a real word. No. But yeah, it's weird, isn't it? That people from outside. My father-in-law used to call him, when he first got to know me, apart from any racial slurs behind my back, he used to call me Peck Deck Dom.
Peck Deck Dom?
Yeah. You know, that's Peck Deck, that machine.
All right.
Yeah, Peck Deck Dom. Yeah. So I called him Big Gut John. Which would he prefer?
I used one of your jokes, actually, on one of Cicely's mates' dads yesterday. We went to this Christmas thing. And we were on about summer, and you've said this. Where do you hang your shirt on a walk? Good one, that.
It's a good. I have mentioned that to him, to my father-in-law as well.
Giant new shirt on a walk.
Did you iron that shirt over a walk? Yeah,
It's a good one, isn't it?
It's a nicer way than saying you fat twat.
Yeah.
But yeah. All right then. Well, this is an intro, so we don't want to be rabbiting on for too long. We've already been chuntering on for 10 minutes. But in the new year, I'm trying to think. When did I say the last show will be next? The one after this one. I did mention at the end of this one. Yeah, I did mention at the end of this one that the show before Christmas, this will be the last one, but it's the next one. So it'll be episode 208. That will be the last one until that will be released on the 21st. We won't have another release till the 4th of Janvier, which will probably just be me and Chris yapping, or we might even do a live show or something like that, just yapping away, a bit like we did with Mark Bajerski and Phil from Amish the other night. That was quite a good chat, that, just for an hour and a half live on there. Just, just there were no notes. It was just one of them off the spec things. I did invite you, but you couldn't be asked. You were sozzled on settee, probably.
you asked me as you went live. I don't know. I was doing some.
I asked Mark as we went live, and Phil when we were live. That's how shooting from the hip it was. I didn't even invite Phil until he came into the chat.
That was good to see him on there. Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, he's a good guy. Do you know what? He's got a lot of knowledge, as Phil, hasn't
he? Yeah.
I don't think he realises what knowledge he's got, Phil. What he's carrying around with him in his head. A bit like you, that phrase I used at the end at this podcast, which I won't say because people will laugh, I think, at that one.
More insults in my direction.
Yeah. What other direction is there? Live events next year. We're obviously doing the one with the Rise Above guys and Mark Devlin on March 8th, much to Christian's happiness. Because they booked the day on his Lancing his wisdom. Anyway, we won't go into it. Booked it on his Chris's Young'un's birthday. Only them mad bastards could do that. Yeah, I know. That was me back of the train on Live and Let Die laugh.
Yeah, Mark Smith.
Yeah. Stuart from Mablethorpe keeps contacting us. If you're listening, Stuart, I do get your emails and you're not a pest. We really love you. Don't worry about it. We're probably planning on doing a couple more in Huddersfield next year at some point, probably in the springish time, April, May time, possibly, even June. Those type of months we'll probably do a couple more shows there. We'll mention it more in the new year because it went well last year, didn't they?
Yeah, good.
Probably got a couple more speakers as well lined up as well as Mark. Might even make it a weekender. One person who got back in touch with me, Chris, you'll be pleased to know, is the guy that we watched on that Cambridge University. This house would make vaccinations mandatory, Cambridge Union. Jess, he got in touch with us, didn't he?
Yeah.
So he's booked in for January, hopefully.
Be interested to know what got him on that. How did he get on that?
I don't know, but in his email he said he was very nervous when he did that, and I'm not surprised. He went into the lion's den.
I wouldn't have done it. No way.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't. Do you know
his email was funny because he said his email would have titled, "I'm the one who's not a prick." Because there's only one guy there who weren't a prick.
Yeah, but yeah, it were brave, and I couldn't. I struggled now being around that type of energy. Because you wish it's brave, and I think people need to do it. By the way, I struggle.
No, but that's not that kind of energy. That's intense version of that energy.
Yes,
he's surrounded.
Yeah.
He's like, what?
Yeah. Even the people on his side weren't on his side.
No.
How does that work?
Probably that one guy who didn't get the jib jab were on his side.
Yeah.
He probably didn't get it for medical reasons.
And he bottled it. He was just sat up in rafters.
Probably didn't realise when he put his hand up that no one else was going to.
Yeah. But, I mean, it was great throwing bombs, truth bombs into the centre of Cambridge University. So well done, Earl. And it'd be good to have a chat with you. Yeah. We did do a podcast with a Norwegian chap called Frank Nielsen the other day, didn't we? Or the other week. That should be coming out as well at some point. And I think the next podcast is Bob Moran. So that'll be the one that's released.
You shouldn't mention ones that are coming up, facts. You curse them.
And, well, he'll look if the change a change. You know, we set out on this one where we...
Oh, if that Norwegian guy gets back to you with that one, you could release that when we're not doing one.
Or just do it next week. Next year. Who knows? I'll wait to see when it comes over anyway. It's been 2 weeks now, so Frank, I'm not holding my breath. A good guy though, wasn't he, Frank? A funny guy. Yeah, top bloke. If you're listening, Frank. There's no rush anywhere. Whenever it's ready, it's ready. So intro.
Shout, Frank.
Yeah, sorry, shout, Frank. Come on, Frank. We're only saying that because he's in Norway.
I know.
Probably set his pack of huskies on us. So who we got on this week? We got Matt Sergiou. We had some terrible tech issues this week for some reason.
Yeah.
My computer reset itself. Chris had issues as well on the same day, and Matt had issues as well. So basically, we were recording on the Tuesday, and we had to move it to the Wednesday. And Matt was still having a few issues. We sorted our shit out, but
didn't affect it though. I think it was just a little flicker on it.
Yeah, I think Matt would just take piss out of us.
Good to chat about the John Lennon, Paul McCartney stuff. I'm sure people find that interesting.
It is interesting. I mean, we listen to Mike Williams. People email in or put comments on saying, "Have you ever heard of Mike Williams?" I'm thinking, what? I mean, you'd heard of him when he first started thereabouts.
Before he was doing Paul McCartney stuff, actually.
Yeah.
In fact, I could blame or thank him for getting me into numerology.
Right. Yeah.
I think it was him that got me first looking at it.
Yeah.
Even before the COVID nonsense.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, you told me in the mid 2010s about him.
The point when I told you was when I said I've been listening to this guy who talks about Paul McCartney. The point when I told you was when he said he wasn't going to do it anymore. I think that was in 2017.
Yeah, that one when he was 25.
And he's still doing it. Yeah,
he's still doing it.
Well, he said stop.
Yeah, so the caveat here is Matt agrees with, 90% of what Mike's research shows, but he disagrees with some. Disagrees probably the wrong way. He's got a different version of events.
He said he's open to change his mind at any moment.
And I'm sure Mike is as well. Yeah,
his opinion at this point in time is this and this and this and this. And I mean, I ain't got a clue for it. I find it interesting. I've got no interest in Beatles at all.
No,
and I've read that bloody Billy Shears book, that 666-page Billy Shears book. I don't even know how I read it because I've got no interest in Beatles, but I found it quite interesting.
Yeah.
And I've always found the subjects interesting.
So please don't email me and saying Paul McCartney's definitely dead, but Paul McCartney's not dead. I agree. It's irrelevant, right?
I've got a cholesterol book here as well.
Right. I think we can safely say that that the shenanigans was cultural change, and they used the Beatles for that. And whatever's in the middle there in the mix, that is worth talking about. Every angle, definitely 100%. It's not plain sailing, and I love Mike's work. I do. Mike, and I actually like listening to how Mike talks. He's he's a very calming guy, isn't he? When he talks as well, and Matt's very sincere. And I'd say who I've come across, their work on this particular one subject, they've drilled down heavily on this subject. In Matt's words, is obsessive about the detail about it. And as you know, me and Matt have this kind of research. I think you said research bromance going on.
Research gay bromance, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's because he's got more hair than me, and I'm making up for my follically challenged head and chin.
Yeah, Nick Collestrom's also written a book about Paul McCartney as well.
Yeah. Well,
weirdly, right? I didn't hear about Paul McCartney. The last kitchen when I was head chefing, one of my guys told me about it because they all knew me as a conspiracy nut job, and we're going back 2015 or something. And he said, I don't believe in any of your bullshit conspiracies. The only one I believe in is the Paul McCartney one. And I was like, what? I'd never heard of it. And then I started looking at it. And I think I don't know. Yeah. And then I'd never heard of it. Or if I had, it was floating somewhere in the back of my mind. I didn't ever care. You know? Yeah.
But we don't just talk about the Paul is dead stuff. I mean, the Beatles, the occult side the occult side of the Beatles is fascinating, isn't it? And I suppose that's Matt has got into that deeply, and he does other stuff as well, like the Bloomsbury Group and stuff. It sort of interlocks with the stuff we've been doing on the Huxleys. We come from a totally different angle to what Matt's doing. At some point, I'm sure there'll be a collaboration of some sorts there. But yeah, so all you Mike Williams fans, we are Mike Williams fans as well.
But he talks quite a lot about it. This is the guy, because I've listened to this guy talk before. I think
what are we on about now? The John Lennon thing?
Yeah, he's written a book. The guy who he's talking a lot, the Assassination of John Lennon by David Whelan.
Yeah.
Because I went back and I was listening to Matt talk about that book again. I mean, I've listened to an interview with the fella before, and then after we spoke to Matt, I went back and just had a listen to Matt talking about it.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
an interesting angle.
All right, then we'll move on. If you join us in part 2, we will see you there. If we don't see you there, we'll see you next week. All right, welcome back to Sheep Farm Podcasts. This is episode 207, although it seems like 4007 because it's taken us about 15 takes and 2 days to get to this point due to some technical issues that hit all of us, actually. All of us. Tonight we're joined by our good friend Matt Sergiou, who, I hope I've pronounced that, I've probably kicked it right in the dusters there. And who's joining us again. It's a year since he's been on. I can't believe it because we're in contact quite a lot through emails and that. Mark says we only send about 12 emails a day, something like that, but that's about it. And when I said to Mark, Matt's coming on in a week or so, he said, there goes 4 hours. Chris is looking at me thinking, oh, fuck.
Tea's getting ready in an hour.
Yeah. I've had double tea just to my supper. Just kicking. Welcome, Matt.
Hello. So here's to the next 4 hours then.
Yeah.
Sleeping bags at the ready. Yeah. And that's everyone listening, never mind us.
Yeah. We had some terrible technical issues yesterday. You had some, I had some, Chris had some. It is all, didn't it?
I know. Normally when you do these kind of things, when I'm hosting a podcast, interviewing someone or something, it's normally one person that's having the issue. It's never to both sides, that are having the problem. It's never the host and the guest. It's either the guest or the host. But for some reason, yesterday when we tried to record this, we were all having problems. Freezing up, glitching of the microphones.
Change.
Yes, climate change or
no, it's all climate change. Yeah, it's definitely.
Climate change. Definitely. Yeah. Of course.
Or the 2020 arm spearing nonsense. It might be that as well.
Well, I did break wind yesterday, and probably damaged the environment, and it probably got through into the electricity cables. And, it's to be expected. I know it does. Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Methane, you see, methane. Yeah. That's what it is.
Exactly.
I mean, they're now feeding cows methane, reducing feed additives into. I said to Johnny Eamon last week, "What the fuck are we living through? What are we living through?"
Yeah.
It is clown world, isn't it? I mean, there isn't a better way to sum it up than clown world.
Do you know what's mental about that is, I was thinking about this today, is they've actually got the ability to convince everyone that it's true, that cows' farts are actually destroying the planet. Yeah. I mean, that is an actual joke, isn't it? Surely. Somewhere.
So I really do steer away from watching the news, listening to the news, but so we've lived for thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years with cattle eating grass, which is what they eat.
Yeah.
So what is the official what's the official statement as to why it's no longer the thing for cows to do? And why is it now that it's destroying the earth? What's the official narrative on this?
Nonsense, isn't it? It's rising it's rising CO2 levels. That's where it's.
But what I don't understand is why are cows now the problem when they haven't been for thousands of years previously? Why is it now?
Well, maybe they should be taking on the sea if they want to take on CO2, even if it was true, or even volcanoes, maybe not cows.
It's just, what are cows supposed to eat instead of grass then?
Well, the issue you've got is that now, even when I tell a story, some of our supplements that we sell, we were going to start selling collagen, which some of it comes from fish, some of it comes from bovine and other animals, cows.
Yeah.
And this particular branded item that we got, with really good collagen, comes from cows. And it's so we got this massive pallet of bloody collagen delivered. And this story broke. So we emailed the company and says, can you tell us whether this has got bovia tannin? So previously they'd already released a statement about it. about 2 days before we asked them. And they give us this standard fucking Keir Starmer statement type of nonsense that basically didn't answer the question. It basically went into how safe this Bovia was, even though it's just a trial.
All right.
Remind you of anything?
Oh, yeah. Safe and effective.
Yeah, safe and effective. So we said, well, we want his money back. And they came and picked it up today.
Right.
So
I'm guessing you ordered that before the shitstorm even started.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But apparently it's been out in Europe for 2 years.
I was just going to say that, yeah.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah. So they've been kind of experimenting on us without us. No, they've been using us as human guinea pigs, as it were, to see what.
Since 2021. What else happened in 2021?
Isn't it funny though that they actually got a reaction for saying this? It's everywhere, isn't it? I mean, did they think there wasn't going to be a reaction, or?
Well, I think, Chris, right, it's twofold. One, all the farmers are kicking off at the moment, currently. Now this makes farmers look bad, like they're just doing it for money, poisoning the food chain.
Oh, yeah.
Also, they want people to stop eating meat and dairy products so we can eat the bugs. So this is a good way of turning people off. Even people who are into health stuff say, well, like I am, for instance, you won't eat it unless you get clarification. It hasn't got it in. And they can't give you that because the food chain is that contaminated. Unless it's organic, as I spoke about last week, you can't use food additives in organic produce. It's as simple as that. So, but the normal everyday milk that Arla sell and other people, they're using food. But they also use, there's about 20 food additives they put in there, even before this.
Mm. Yeah.
And that's without the other bloody pharmaceuticals they give them. So this isn't new news. So why now? Like you say, Chris, why publish this now? Because they know they're going to get a backlash. They know people are going to stop. They want to crash the market. They're crashing everything. If you notice, everything is being unfolded. It reminds me of the car market. They're folding that as well. The EV market. You know, let's get something in that's defective. Travel, everything.
Do you know something? This has just dawned on me, and maybe it's because my brain is in this particular place, and this is the reason I'm thinking this. But in recent years, in the last couple of years, because of my research, which is predominantly about the 60s counterculture in London and the roots of it, and also the Beatles and all of this, the Fabian Society has dipped into that quite a lot from my research.
And look who's running the show now.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. This kind of smacks of Fabianism, which is basically communistic, if you like. It's a form of communism where nobody shall own anything. Oh, wait a minute. Where are we hearing this now? You will own nothing and be happy. But this is communism. So by attacking the cattle again, which they kind of did about 20 or 30 odd years ago, let's not forget the mad cow thing. And also the salmonella in eggs. Remember that in the 80s where they were trying to put
foot and mouth in sheep.
Foot and mouth in sheep. So again, they're attacking the farmer. And we've also got this attack going on in the UK at the moment where there's this tax they're going to levy on farmers with inheritance tax. So basically what you're seeing there is very Fabian, because if you look at Fabian Society documents from 100 and plus years ago, the argument they're putting forward, what they want to see, their projected image is for the lands to be redistributed back to the quote unquote people. So nobody actually owns land anymore. So what are we having here? Like you were saying, what sparked this off is what you said, Dom. It's this kind of taking down of institutions like businesses and the small businessmen, taking their livelihood down, dismantling it, and then rebuilding it, the Great Reset.
Yes.
But redistributing it in a communistic way. So you talk about cars. You know, again, they're using the climate change agenda to basically put people off driving in cars and going onto buses and trains and the 5-minute cities, the 5-minute communities.
But also, Matt, at the same time, they've made public transport more expensive. So it's not a cheap option anymore.
That puts you off going on public transport as well.
Going anywhere.
And it's not reliable, especially if you get on trains. Anyone who goes around the UK in a train, there's always a delay. There's always a cancellation. There's always
work at weekends.
Yeah.
Sorry, this cranked up in 2020 when they turned everything off in 2020. they got people used to all these things as well. And it flipped the switch, didn't it? Or it sped it up. It was still happening anyway.
It never restarted the same fight. It never came back the same.
No. It never does, though, does it?
Everyone had kind of forgotten what
Yes.
going on.
They've done it with the music industry as well, because you alone nothing and be happy. Well, what have they done? They've taken away physical media. Okay, vinyl is coming back. There is a resurgence. But whether that's down to old bastards like us who refuse to let go of it, so there is a market that's independents is thinking, no, wait a minute, we're gonna keep our fingernails dug into the wood here. We're not going to let go and jump off. We're going to hang on. So maybe that has something to do with it. But yeah, I mean, you look, they bring in CDs, then they get rid of them. They're trying to get rid of physical music so that people don't own, they don't have music collections anymore. People don't have shelves with records on them and CDs and tapes. It's all
books.
MP3, not even MP3s anymore. Not where you yourself download it yourself and collect it on a USB stick or whatever. It's Spotify. So you go to a website and you listen to it on a website. So you don't actually own it. You might buy it. You might buy the song for 20p or 50p or whatever it is, but you don't actually hold it in your hand. You can't put it on a shelf and see it. So never really yours, really, because one day you could go to Spotify to play that song and Mr. Spotify might decide, you know what, I don't think people should listen to this anymore. I'm taking it off. So you can't access it anymore.
Yeah. Or the car you're in, playing this music on, is releasing too much CO2. So we're going to limit your access to your favourite song.
Yeah. Or there's a message in the song that all of a sudden has been cancelled.
Or you get cancelled and they start deleting your... or taking away your content for your enjoyment.
You can just see it live.
I mean, it sounds. It's not even sounding that crazy, actually. You know, your video collection, film collection, music collection.
Well, don't forget they're doing you a favour, Chris. They're hosting it for you.
It gets blocked because you're not having the jib jab that you should have had or whatever. I mean, that is communism, isn't it? That is that thing in China that happens that we always go, oh, in China they do this and that.
You are a climate criminal.
Slowly fucking creeping up on us, and no one seems to realise.
But you're right there as well, Matt, about the physical records. Me and Chris were discussing this about the move from the analog age to the digital age in the, say, 90s. Now it's gone from digital to VR, virtual reality as well. And so they're speeding it up, aren't they? I don't know. People are talking about AI, so I suppose I'm throwing that into there as well. Whether AI is as real as they tell us it is, because it's still invented by man. So how real can it be? It's just a faster computer in my eyes. But
speaking of that, actually, I've already got a record player, and I literally just got a new desk to put it on in my kitchen, and I was playing some vinyl today. But even if there's a resurgence of vinyl, it's only a very minimal amount of people in it, really. It's not. It's not the actual populace isn't going vinyl, is it? It's
But then again, having said that, if you go to HMV, since it got rescued, it went bankrupt a couple of years or so back, and some Australian guy came in who owns record stores, and he bought them up. And if you walk into an HMV now, it's mostly vinyl.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Which is, interesting, But whether people are buying it or whether it's some kind of, it just looks good and it just draws people to come in, and then they look at other things while they're in the shop, like books or merchandising or, T-shirts and stuff. They're not actually buying the records. It's just a way of getting them in. Think, oh, look, how quaint, records, vinyl. And then they go off and buy, a T-shirt.
But they've done the same to the club scene, haven't they? So everything you think has been dismantled. It's probably a better word.
Scene?
Exactly. Yeah, it's gone. I don't know. We're too old to think of a club scene. I know that there are sort of retro doos and stuff like that for old giffers like us, Zimmer frame doos. But the actual club scene used to drive through a town. It was actually enjoyable, even just driving through a town on a Saturday night, seeing all the madness that were going on, and hearing the music and stuff like that. It's just non-existent now.
I don't even know what happens in the clubs. I mean, I know my son Seb still goes clubbing occasionally. He'll go to some.
Okay, so what does he?
30. He's 30.
So what does he say about when he? Have you asked him what happens when he goes to a club? Is it busy for a start? Do people still go out? Do they dance? What do they do?
Yeah, I mean, he seems to. I mean, to be fair, he actually say club. It's more like he'll go to some kind of like little function or festival kind of thing. He's DJ'd at a few himself. But yeah, I don't know if it's like a club that's on every week or anything like it used to be. It used to be the same venues every week would do the same thing, didn't they? I mean, I always think it's funny. We used to go to one in Huddersfield. Imagine in rainy Huddersfield, freezing your nuts off, queuing up to go in Sunset Boulevard. Why the fuck were it called Sunset Boulevard?
Yeah.
Every town had one, didn't it? Romanos or something like that. They all had the.
And it was packed out. And it used to open on a soul night on a Monday.
Yeah.
And there used to be coaches, because it was right next to the railway station. There'd be coaches parked in the railway car park that come from all over the north of England just to this soul, 80s soul do. And it were in the 80s, so it were a proper 80s soul do.
Yeah.
But like I say, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, rammed, weren't they?
Absolutely rammed. Yeah.
Having been a club DJ myself from when I left school, so 1986, 87, right all the way through till 2012, I was actually a professional. That's how I made my living. So I feel very fortunate that I could make my living as a club DJ. And yeah, I mean, just thinking back to the late 80s and early 90s when you would have like a street full of clubs, door to door. Pub clubs, as they used to call them. You'd have pub clubs where you would go to a pub club, which is basically somewhere where you would go before you would go to the main club at 10, 11 at night through till 2 o'clock in the morning. You would have the warm-up clubs, which were called the pub clubs, because basically that's what they were. They were pubs with a DJ in them. So I used to work in one of those because I preferred working in those. I just preferred the atmosphere of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, to cut a very long story short, I can just remember late 80s into the early to mid 90s working in these places on this particular street, and you would have one queue coming out of yours going into the one next door and another queue coming out of next door's one going into yours, and you would have this all the way down the street, and this would kick off at about 8:30 in the evening, and by 9 o'clock you could not move in whichever of those venues you were in. It was like being a sardine in a tin. You just couldn't move. And I was working Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday nights. I was working 5 nights a week. Fast forward to now, you'd be lucky to go out on a Saturday night and see a club open, let alone be busy.
And not only that club, right, that local club used to keep all the hairdressers, clothing shops, all these people, because every week you get paid, you go spend your wage on some clothes. When I had hair, you'd have your hair cut and all that, and then you'd look forward to going out with your new clothes on at the weekend type of thing.
Yes, exactly what my wife says, because she owns a clothes boutique,
right?
And she says to me, when the clubs were busy back in the day, Saturday was one of the busiest days because everyone would go out on a Saturday to her shop to buy clothes to get, tarted up, if you like, so they could go out at night, and it helped the local economy,
When do you think this decline started? I mean, it's probably a follow-on from an addendum, if you like, to the stuff we did with Mark last year on that, the Second Summer of Love type of stuff.
Second Summer of Love,
because I noted after the big sort of payday in the millennium, it started a steady decline around that time. There was a big build-up that ripped everybody off and charged them 10 times more than they should have done to get into a club. The big name DJs that we've spoke about were on tens of thousands of pounds just to play on the Millennium Night.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it is social interaction, because back then, before there were any phones or not even social media, no phones. Yeah. The only way to social interact with people of your age group was to go to a bar or a club.
Yeah.
And then you'd be mingling with them. And now they can just instantly text or message or face message or whatever.
Go on PlayStation or whatever it is.
Yeah. That social interaction doesn't have to be face to face anymore, does it?
It's interesting you say that.
It's right, but I'm just saying.
Because one of the reasons I gave up club DJing in 2012. Interestingly, 2012.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the universe was trying to say to me, but one of the reasons I gave up was because I noticed so I've been DJing from about 1986, 87. So I've seen generations, young generations come in, come of age, go out to clubs, get older, get married, move on. Then the next generation comes in. So I've seen a number of generations come and go. But the last generation that I saw coming in, and they're the reason that I gave up, just couldn't do it anymore, because I noticed that I'd be DJing and I would look over and I would see a group of girls coming in and sitting down on a sofa. And for some reason, it just made me angry. I would just see them sitting there and they would all get their phones out and start interacting with their phones. So there'd be like 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 girls sitting together on a sofa. None of them are looking at each other or talking or drinking or dancing or having a good time. They're all immersed in their phones. Each and every one of them is immersed in their own phone. And I'm thinking, so why have they come out? What are they doing exactly? Why have they got dressed up to go out, to sit down on a sofa, to look into a telephone?
And you would have thought, Matt, out of all, and I mean, we always talk about the younger end on the phones. You would have thought the one place they wouldn't be doing that would be in a nightclub, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
You would think so.
Well, if you think about when we were younger and phones came out, and I was at the brunt end because my business was selling them, right? But you couldn't do anything with them. You could make a call, but you couldn't even put them. They were that big initially. You couldn't even put them in your pocket. And even if you made a call, you couldn't hear anybody. And then texting came, and it's when the social media side of it's come. That is when total diversion of brain cells, if you like, has gone down to the Black Mirror.
Yeah. But now it's not even the younger end. You can see 2 OAPs on the park bench, both on the phones now. It's moved even beyond that. But you would have thought, like I said before, that the club would have been. You would have thought that.
I can remember, Chris, right, going to Showcase Cinema with my mate, and I took my phone out, and the security guard came up to me and said, "You can't take your phone in there," and they took it off me. Took it off me and put it in a safe. They wouldn't allow me in the cinema with my breeze block.
I remember having a go at a girl for having the phone behind me while we were in cinema.
Yeah, that was about 1993-ish, something like that.
There's a lot of reasons in the UK anyway why Clubland has died. Another reason is the anti-smoking, the not smoking inside law.
I think 2020
that killed it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
2020 round us. Chuck Norris it.
Yeah. But it was on the decline as well before then. I think late licensing also killed it. You'd have thought it wouldn't have done, but it did. And I think the reason behind that, I remember when because before, when I started DJing in the 80s, clubs used to close at 1 o'clock in the morning. And if you wanted to close at 2, you had to get a special license to do that. And that was a big deal if in your town or city there was a club. Hey, everybody, let's go down to such and such a club because that closes.
Yeah.
And at 2, and it was a big deal,
And there was no.
And then when they brought the late licensing in, and they made exactly. So a lot of people that went to those particular clubs weren't actually going there for the music. They were going there because.
Well, no, that's when the good clubs you went for the good music. The shit clubs you went for an extra beer.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, even clubs like the Hacienda are only up until 2 o'clock. Ministry of Sound, places like that.
And you know what? From a DJ's point of view, that's brilliant. Not because you're getting paid less. But it's a great thing from an artistic point of view. If I can say artistic, maybe I'm being a bit too pretentious, but that means you're playing your set, your DJ set, and you can leave it on a high. You're going to finish. You're looking at the clock. It's 1:45 or 1:45, whenever you're going to close. You've got 10, 15 minutes left. You want to finish on a high. So you finish on a high. Everybody leaves the club at the same time on a high. And you felt, right, I felt like I put on a show tonight. But when you close at 6 in the morning, when these new laws came in, the problem is, I remember my boss at the club where I was working at the time, he says, yeah, great, 6 o'clock in the morning. Oh, this is going to be great, Matt. Just think of all the money, rubbing his hands and thinking, this is going to be great. And I'm thinking, well, wait a minute, Colin, because the problem is that just because you're going to close at 6, it doesn't mean that people are going to be staying out till 6 spending money because, you're open late, but people have still got the same amount of money in their pocket.
And not only that, the night will be different. So
it will, exactly. And that because people don't have. No, they drift off. Exactly. So it gets to 2, 3 o'clock. They start to drift off. They started to drift off. I noticed this because people have got no money left. You can open till 6 in the morning, but if you can't afford to drink, you're either going to go home or you're going to straggle around with your hands in your pocket, sitting in the club, which is emptying because no one's got any money and no one's spending money at the bar. But at the same time, you have to pay the bar staff for staying on extra. You have to pay the DJ. You have to pay the doorman, who are well expensive. Put the doorman and the security and the DJs together. They're the most expensive. So electricity,
Everything, all the bills.
It's
And
funny,
the
actually.
police. You have to pay for the police as well to
Right.
stay out later. The club bosses have to pay the police. That's not paid through the tax or your rates. That's paid by the club bosses.
It's probably paid
So-
twice. Probably paid for twice. It probably is paid for through your council tax and everything else, and clubs have to pay as well.
Yeah.
It's a mafia extortion racket.
So I think that was another reason which that club started to close. I think it flagged because of the late licensing. It didn't actually help. It didn't.
And because bars started opening later, there wasn't as much need for a club, was there?
And people would come out later. They wouldn't come out at 9 or 10.
It's like somebody
anymore.
was.
They'd start coming in at midnight.
It's like
So you
somebody
wouldn't
was in.
start getting busy till midnight.
It's like somebody at Tavistock were writing it down, and they knew from the Mousetopia experiments what would happen.
I'll tell you another thing as well. on a parallel,
We can start something so we can close it down as well. Sorry, Chris, go on.
On a parallel at the same time, big companies started buying pubs. 'Cause I always worked in the pub restaurant trade, and if you remember when pubs used to shut between 2 and 5 or whatever, 2 and 6, and then all of a sudden pubs and bars started opening all day, and then again, it just reminded me of what you said. But that meant you had to. So it was normal and almost frowned upon if you didn't open all day, but then it had to be staffed up all day. So there was no rush. It was just a drift of people between 2 and 5 or 6, 7 o'clock, where it used to be a lunchtime trade, dinner trade. And then it just became this drift of nothing. But places were still expected to stay open. Do you know something I thought about the other day? This is weird. It's me and Dom were on about. We're always saying when you were a kid, the guy who owned the pub in the village or in the pub owner was always quite well.
He always had a jag, didn't he? Or
you think about it, after we had that conversation. When we
Yeah.
had that conversation, I was thinking about EastEnders because I saw it on TV, like an old one. And if you remember Dirty Den, he was the richest guy in the square, wasn't he? He always had a suit on. Him and his missus were always going on holiday, but they just owned a little boozer. But they were like the richest guys in town, weren't they?
Yeah.
So it were an obvious thing, you know.
But every part of social culture has been destroyed, and now they're after the food chain, the water chain. I mean, I think it was Thames Water took 700,000 in bonuses out the board, and it's leaking sewage and all sorts into the water supply. And they've closed. They haven't opened a new reservoir since 1991, and they've closed about 100.
I think that's.
And then they say there's a water shortage.
It's one of the most obvious ones. Since they privatised it, they've done nothing, and then it's now reaching a point of it's all just failing, really failing.
Yes.
And then it's all blamed on this and that. Like Dom says, they're getting ridiculous bonuses. That's an actual, almost like a bloody, a version of everything we've just talked about.
It is. Yeah. If they can fail water in one of the wettest countries in the world, I mean, the clubs don't stand a chance, do they? But because everything's failing, it can't be an accident.
And it's all happening in every country as well at the same time.
Yeah, in lockstep. Yeah, it's sad and interesting at the same time to observe it, but we're part of it because we knew in our generation, like you said, Matt, we were very lucky to be able to experience all these exciting things in our lives. Whether it's going to a record shop and buying a piece of vinyl and rushing home, thinking you're the first one ever to buy that piece of vinyl, even though they've sold loads of them.
Some of my mates were DJs, Matt, and I wouldn't a DJ at all. But
no, I wouldn't either.
I remember waiting outside. There was a couple of record shops in Huddersfield, and if we went
music room, were one of them.
Was that the one? There was a few, but when I went with mates, I mean, a few mates were DJs. One of Jimbo was a good DJ, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And I'd go and have to stand outside waiting for him while he's just fucking flicking through records and talking to the guy in the record shop.
Yeah, that's me.
The compromise was I had to drag him to comic shop with me. I used to read comics.
But everything you've just said something there though, Chris. Everything was about touching it. Everything was about
and the social
aspect of it, wasn't it?
You wouldn't just go into a record shop just to buy a record. You'd go in there to chat with the guy behind the counter, and the record rep would come in from EMI or to sell the latest records or try and fix them in the charts. I used to see a lot of that going on.
Right.
A lot of fixing going on. All the record company reps from all the majors would come in to sell records to particular shops that had, because there were certain shops in every town and city in Britain which had the machine, which was linked and hooked up to the UK top 40 singles and albums chart. So every time a record was sold, they had this wand on this machine in the shop, and they would wave the wand over the barcode. And once they did that, it would get put into the official chart. And every record company that would go out and sell the records, all the reps that used to go out in the cars and sell this stuff, knew which shops had those machines. So they would make a beeline for those shops. And there would be deals struck with the record shop owner. You know, if you take on an extra load and put the barcode through, we'll give you,
bonus
give
this,
you
bonus that,
bonus this, bonus that. And the owner of the record shop, well, it would say, well, if you do this for me, I'll give you one of the guys I knew had a record shop. He used to sell electrical goods as well, like TVs and video recorders. And he would say, well, look, if you do this for me, I'll give you a free TV and I'll take you out for lunch. It's on me and all this. I used to see this going on all the time.
Certainly equates back to being on the right record label to get a number one, that's what it's all about. Then, wasn't it? About getting into number one.
And Mike Rutherford, was it Mike Rutherford? Peter Rutherford, I think his name was. Forgive me if I've got it wrong. The guy from Frankie Goes to Hollywood. The dancer, do you remember the dancer? Frankie Goes to Hollywood?
I can't remember his name, but Paul Rutherford, I think he was called, wasn't it? Might be right. Yeah. I think he was Paul.
When Frankie Goes to Hollywood split in the mid-'80s, that was around the time that Acid House was starting to get big. And he made an Acid House record called Get Happy, I think it was called. And it was going up, it was slowly climbing up the top 100, and it was going to make its way into the top 40. And they were fixing that. I saw that happen. I saw them come into the shop where I was, and they were barcoding it like crazy. They went to another shop after they went to the shop where I was loitering about as usual. And the lady that was running the other shop where they had the machine with the barcode wand, she was actually quite, honest, might be the word. She had principles, and she said, what do you think you're doing? And she actually grossed them up. She actually phoned up the record company and says, I think it was 4th and Broadway Records. And she said, do you know that your rep has been in and he's doing this and that? I think she actually phoned up Gallup, who were actually running the chart at the time, and told them about this. And it slipped down the charts. They actually took off the sales for it. They took a guess. They took a rough estimate and said, okay, well, we reckon that it was probably barcoded falsely about this amount of times. Okay, let's drop it down about so many positions down the charts. And when they did that, it was actually around kind of like the mid-40s, and it was just about to get into the top 40 and give the guy a top 40 hit, and hence catapult his career potentially as a solo artist. And then this woman in this local record shop grassed it up.
Guy-boshed it.
And that was it. That was the end of Paul Rutherford. That was the end of him.
Once you were in the top 40, you were in with a chance, weren't you?
Yeah, but that was it. She phoned up Gallup or whoever she did phone, and that was the end of him. Yeah. Destroyed. Absolutely annihilated.
He managed leather pants.
I'm sure it was a shit song anyway, called Happy, and it was
so he wasn't happy at all. Yeah, get happy.
Just before we crack on, where can people find your stuff, Matt? Before we.
Okay, I've actually had to write this down. In preparation.
Your own stuff. You had to write where your own stuff is down.
Yeah. That's how bad my memory is. Okay, so you've got the Occult Beatles, and that's the occultbeatles.wordpress.com. There's conspiromedia.wordpress.com, and that site is basically as it is as it's been for the last few years. It was launched in 2012, but in the last few years, it's been centering on research to do with the 60s counterculture, the so-called counterculture of London, to see, looking at clues of social engineering. That's where a lot of my research has been dedicated on, as well as the Beatles. So that's what you'll find if you go to Conspiromedia. There's also my Facebook page, Conspiromedia, where you get a mishmash of all of that and extra stuff as well. And ConspiroTV, which is like YouTube or Rumble or BitChute. Yeah, all of that.
And I know people are going to say, you've got to listen. Do you listen to Mike Williams, right? People ask us this, put comments in on YouTube. Yes, we do listen to Mike Williams. We listen to a lot of his stuff. And personally, I know Chris does. Chris introduced me to his work. I respect a lot of his work. You respect his work as well, don't you, Matt? I believe. Or have I just spoken outwardly there? You've just said then, so there's another answer to that one. Or shouldn't I be asking it?
I don't. get the time to watch a lot of his stuff. I've actually watched an interview he did the other day with an author of a new book about Paul is Dead. I can't remember the title of it, but she's basically put together this theory that a few of the Beatles songs, if you look at the lyrics, they're giving clues to Seattle.
Yeah, I watched that as well. Yeah,
Yeah,
interesting, wasn't it?
Yeah,
very
that was. Yeah, very interesting. And I'm reading that book at the moment. So I do watch him every now and again. I don't agree with everything he's got to say.
No, should we?
Don't.
No, should we?
No.
Because a lot of stuff is theorized, isn't it? Let's face it. You know, right? There's theory, and the stuff you can say that definitely happened. There's nothing wrong with theory, by the way. And I'm not saying Mike's work's theory, but all of it. But some of it is theory. Some of what we say is theory as well. You know.
Yeah.
So not everybody agrees with that. But a theory, you can't disagree or not agree with it because it's in theory.
You're just putting across an idea and saying, what do you think of this? And then it's the way I see it is when I write an article or put together a presentation on YouTube or whatever, what I'm saying is, this isn't the way it is. I'm saying, right, this is what I've found.
Yeah.
I've put it together as a presentation. See what you think. And then it's down to the reader or the listener to make up their own mind and maybe even email me, contact me and say, hey, have you thought of this? What if it's this? Or what if it's that? Have you decided completely what do you think you should, you know, and then you start to think about what other people are saying once they've seen your work and, you know, they email you and say, well, you know, have you seen it this way? And you think, no, I haven't seen it that way. And I don't like to preach at people.
No, I don't. I love the way Mike talks though as well. He never upsets you when he talks. You know what I mean? Even if you disagree with somebody, some people he could, like Alex Jones fragments, he could say, I'm not listening to him because he just winds me up. Just his voice winds me up. However, somebody like Mike, his voice is fantastic in it when you listen to him. He's just a great way of explaining things. Man, he used to be an hypnotist, so that's how good he was. Yeah. But you like his stuff, don't you? What's your play on then, the Paul is Dead stuff? Have you got an overlay, or can it be sort of made into a tiny explanation?
Right, I screwed up first when you said that.
Oh, God, you screwed up now. Well, whatever you say to me, you're screwed, because I just go off into one. Disclaimer. Okay, and the disclaimer is my mind is open. It's if something happens tomorrow or someone presents me with something that and says to me, here, look at this, consider this, then my mind might change. So I'm not set in stone with this. I know a lot of Paul is Dead theorists who put their work out there are pretty much it's set in stone and they will not move, they will not budge, and they will not entertain any different idea as to what their theory, you know, that's the theory they have. And if someone comes along and says, no, have you considered this? No, they'll say, no, I'm not going to consider that. This is my theory. But as I say, I'm not like that. I try not to be like that.
Can't be like that.
So no, you can't. So disclaimer, this is where I am at the moment, but it could change depending on if anybody comes forward with something different and I look at it and think, God, that's it.
Just to mention, you know, the pain on your face when Dom asked you that question was quite amusing.
Was it?
Yeah. What's your opinion on Paul Gatt? You've screwed up.
Not another bastard asking me that question. Yeah.
Bastard. All right, then. So this is it. Right. I do not believe in the orthodox theory, which has been bandied around since 1969 in the mainstream media, that Paul McCartney, James Paul McCartney, the original Paul McCartney, died in a car crash in September 1966 or November 66, depending on which way you put the numbers on the date. If it's if you're looking at it the American way or the British way, i.e. 9/11 or 11/9. I do not believe. Well, no, I don't want to say believe. I do not buy into that theory as it stands at the moment. I do not think Paul was killed in an accident in a car in 1966. Neither do I think he was murdered in 1966. I think the Paul that was around, whoever that is, who was around pre-66 is still around, okay? Right. And there is a number of reasons that I think that. Having said that, that does not mean that I do not think there are doubles out there, because I do. I think there are doubles out there. There might even be triples and trebles. where do I go with this? Right. Well, okay. I'll try and keep it concise as I possibly can. The reason, right? My reasons for thinking.
Here's the 4 hours.
Yeah, exactly. I'll try to keep it as concise as I possibly can. I've been a Beatles fan since the age of 5. I'm now 55. So that's a bloody long time. So we're talking about, so I've basically been a Beatles nut since I could walk, just started to walk. So that means I've watched I was in, you know, so when you're young, when you're in your teens and you're a child and you're into a band or a singer, you really get into it, don't you? You get obsessive. So I've read all the books, the magazines. Every time they were on TV, I'd be there with my video cassette waiting to record it. So, and a little bit of that obsessiveness is still with me. You know, I still love the Beatles music. You know, if a new book comes out, I'll read it about the Beatles because, well, I feel like I have to in some respects anyway because of the research, because of my website, The Occult Beatles. I have to keep on top of it.
So obsessive.
Yeah, true obsessive. But I also have to do it now because of the websites and the blogs and everything. I have to keep on top of it. So I have to look at these things from an occult conspiratorial angle now when I read these books. So having had that experience and knowing basically what I'm saying is I can see mannerisms in McCartney, the way he talks, the way he moves, you know, little behavioral tics that you can see pre-66 and post-66. Okay, and there, it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you're Al Pacino or Laurence Olivier. There is no actor in the world, I would argue, that could pull that off. Yes, you can have people who can mimic and get it pretty close, but so close as to do it in a way which is like second nature. I would argue that you can't do that. You just can't do that. So I've and there's footage I've seen of Paul talking in like Let It Be, the film that came out in 1970, where it's a documentary where the Beatles are in the studio and they're rehearsing songs for a new album, and it's got in studio banter in between the songs, and you see Paul talking about the old days in Liverpool in the Cavern, and the way he just talks about those old days, it's coming to the way I see it, it's coming from someone who was actually there. Who was actually experiencing those days in Liverpool. This isn't some Billy Shears imposter. You know, there's just no way, as I say, even an Al Pacino couldn't pull that off. Another reason I think, so the reason I think there are more than, well, okay, another reason why I think the Paul that we see now, or some of the Pauls that we see now, because I think there are more than one, is the same as the one, right, so... Pre-66 Paul and post-66 Paul, you can see photographs and video footage of pre-66 Paul. If you look at the nose shape, and the clue is in the nose, there's film footage and photographs. Okay, people will say, listening to this, wow, you can doctor photographs. Okay, so look at video footage then. There's video footage you can see of Paul pre-66, pre-quote-unquote crash with a hook nose. And if you look post-66, quote-unquote crash, you can see a Paul with the same nose. And there's another researcher, and his name is Boomer Blacksheep, and I recommend people go take a look at him on YouTube, because he kind of takes the same look that it takes the same kind of attitude that I take, that Paul necessarily probably didn't die, but there are doubles out there. And he's noticed that there is a Paul that's pre-66 and post-66 who has a scar on his chin. And you can see it post-66 and pre-66. There's also a scar that he got, it's said, from a motorbike crash in 66 or late 65. Depending on which version you want to believe. But certainly before he's meant to have died in a car crash, he's got this slight bump on his lip where it said he was involved in a motorbike crash. It said, although there were some people who think that he was maybe beaten up. actually taken somewhere and secretly beaten up. Because you find that there's actual photographs that were taken post motorbike crash where you see his entire face is almost cut up. You can find this online. The official story is that he was involved in a motorbike crash in December '65, the day after Christmas Day, I think, Boxing Day, I think. He says he was riding on his moped, I think it was, and he fell off. Because he was looking at the full moon and he wasn't looking where he was going, and he fell off, and he fell and his tooth went into his lip, and he had to get a doctor to give him stitches. But there is a problem with that story because people have checked it out. There was no full moon on Boxing Day 1965.
Strange thing to say as well.
Yeah, it's a strange thing to say. There are some people, there's I think his brother came out in his own autobiography, I think it was, and he said that the bike crash, he mentioned it in passing, that it happened sometime in '66. So we've got anomalies there. So was there a bike crash? If there was, when was it exactly? And if there wasn't, was Paul actually taken somewhere and beaten to within an inch of his life for some reason that we don't know about? But whatever way you look at it, he was left with this bump, this scar on his lip, and you can see it's on his top lip, this kind of bump, and you can see it in pre-death Paul and post-death Paul. So you can see that as well. You can see that bump on his lip, and this is in video footage. I've actually found videos of him talking in 1984 and freeze framed them, and you can see it quite clearly. But having said that, you can also find footage and photographs of a different Paul who hasn't got a hooked nose. And we're talking pre-66 and post-66, where he's got a straighter nose. It hasn't got a hook on the end.
Not like Christian's nostrils.
I knew you were going to say that. And also, where he doesn't have the lip bump. So basically, to round it all off, in summary, from what I can gather, there are two Pauls, and they both have been around pre-66 and post-66. Now, what I would also say, just to underline this, and this is what makes me suspicious about the orthodox theory that Paul died in a car crash, was replaced by Billy Shears, Billy Campbell, William, whichever name you want to go with, is it was pushed like mad by the mainstream media in 1969. It was on TV news. It was in Life magazine, which is a very shady magazine. It has very nefarious links. So my question is, why would the mainstream media support a conspiracy theory? Because if you look in history, the mainstream media, when it comes to conspiracy theory, however sensible those theories might sound, they never report them. They don't report on JFK. They don't report on 9/11. They don't report on the Jabba Jobba Jubby Hockey. Do you know what I mean? So why this? Why did they support this? Why did they push this in newspapers, on TV news, in Life magazine? Why? That makes me very suspicious. So I think there is something really shady going on. There are doubles running around for sure. But why? What is the real story, you know?
I would say the mainstream version of the conspiracy, if you like, is probably a smaller version of the real conspiracy, I guess. Because everything, JFK now, there is a mainstream version of a conspiracy. UFOs, everything. And then it's just to throw everyone in a wrong direction, I think.
Yeah.
One thing I will say, though, that is one thing that got me, because I read that Billy Shears book, and I'm not really into the Beatles at all. One thing that got me in that book, it said, if you look at Paul McCartney's son, his biological son now, and you look at pictures of, what's his name, that guy, Billy Shears, the character?
Viv Stanshall from the Bonzo's Dog Doodah band.
Yeah, he does look exactly like him.
Do you know who else he looks like?
Who?
Alistair Crowley.
Yeah, he does. Got the same head shape, hasn't he?
If you look at pictures of James McCartney as he looks now, and you go to look at the picture as Aleister Crowley is on the cover of Sergeant Pepper. I actually did a superimposed thing. I've got a video presentation on my YouTube channel where I link up PID, Paul is Dead, with ancient Egypt symbology, which really connects to the Beatles and Crowley. And I did superimpose James's face to Crowley as he's seen.
I bet he's pleased about
that. What are you suggesting there then, Matt?
That there's some kind of bloodline thing going on there because they just look so alike. It's like spot the difference kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? So it's all just, it's all fucked up.
But there's so many avenues with it. It's not as simple as Paul is Dead, is it?
It's not, because another thing that another great researcher, I can't remember the name of the website now. He doesn't actually do a lot on his site these days, but he was quite busy on it a few years back, but he hasn't really been posting on there for a good 2, 3, 4 years. And I can't remember the name of the website. His name, the guy or the woman, I'm not sure who it is, goes by the name of Redwell Trabant. So if you type that into a search engine, you'll find this website. Redwell Trabant looked into Paul is Dead and I Am a Phony. You know, the Winged Beetle, the YouTube channel that looks into this kind of thing. And he looked at some old he found, I think through Company House, through some company records, that you can find online, you know, government records. And he discovered, or she discovered, I'm not sure if Redwell Trabant is a man or a woman, Redwell Trabant discovered that I Am a Phony, this YouTube channel, Winged Beetle, was being financed by Neil Aspinall. Neil Aspinall used to go to school with Paul McCartney and George Harrison, and he became their road manager when they were in Liverpool, and he stayed with the Beatles right up until he died in the 2000s, I think it was. He was the head of their company, Apple. So why is this PID friendly, Paul is Dead friendly channel being financed seemingly by one of the inner circle of within the Beatles camp? Because Neil Aspinall, he's passed away now, was one of the gatekeepers. If you wanted to get through to the Beatles, if you were a journalist or an author looking to research a book about the Beatles in the 70s when the Beatles had split, in order to get to them, you had to go through Neil. He was their trusted gatekeeper because he went to school with them and he grew up with them, and he was with them from pre-Fame days right the way through to after the split, and he became, as I say, you know, CEO, I think it was, of Apple.
So the rumor were writing a book just before he died about the Beatles. Is that it?
He was, yeah. He was going to put some his memoirs together,
and then conspiracy within a conspiracy.
Yeah, exactly. And then all of a sudden he's gone. Yeah,
there is so many odd things within the Beatles that haven't happened within, say, the Who or the Rolling Stones, or even apparently the Doors are probably just as bad as the Beatles as well.
Yeah.
I'd say those two bands probably more than any other two that I've sort of looked into. I'm sure there are other ones, by the way. I'm not saying they're the only ones, but certainly the Beatles. I mean, when Mike did that breakdown of Mike Williams, that is, of their music and the timelines and stuff like that, that I was more interested in that than I was in the Paul is Dead stuff, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah.
That was a fascinating breakdown, weren't it?
Yeah, it was. Although I would pick a few little holes in it. I think, what was it? He was claiming that the Rubber Soul album, how is it they could have, and do correct me if I'm getting this wrong, because I haven't watched his whole presentation on that, but he's claiming that the Rubber Soul album of 1965, how is it that they could have recorded all those songs within such a short space of time? It's impossible for them to.
Well, I think it was also Matt, that they went into the studio, wrote them in the studio, and then produced them and everything in the studio.
Yeah. I would pick some holes at that, and I might be wrong about this, but I think about three.
By the way, this isn't a Get at Mike. This isn't a Get at Mike show, by the way, because I really
turn out on that.
Yeah, I'm going to say this isn't a Get at Mike show.
No,
at
it's
all.
not. No, it's not. I'm
we don't do that on you. Yeah.
No, because as I said earlier, I've watched his his interviews with various people. I saw his one. He did a presentation on Giles Martin quite recently, who was George Martin's son, the Beatles record producer. So I do watch his output. I'm just saying that people need to be aware that that there's just, with the Rubber Soul album, there's a number of songs on that album which were actually written 2, 3, 4 years before.
And I think that's why collaborations sometimes, when I send you stuff and you send me stuff, and things sort of dovetail into the information.
Yeah.
It's impossible for one person to have all the information. Unless you right, like the chap that wrote the book Chaos, Tom O'Neill. I don't know if you've seen that book.
Yeah.
It took him 20 years to formulate all that. Yeah. It's fantastic research, and it answers a lot of questions that we talk about. And I've talked about for years and years and years about COINTELPRO, mind control, and all this other stuff. So he's a bit of an anomaly, but he's only answering the stuff that we already knew were happening anyway. A lot of the time. Yeah.
So does that make you feel a little bit suspicious?
I don't know about him.
Who, Matt?
Tom O'Neill,
the Chaos guy.
No, I don't think he doesn't come across. Comes across quite sincere. Maybe he was put in a position to do it, but he comes across quite sincere. Yeah. But I don't know the guy personally. Maybe he isn't. But I know what you mean. But the information when I read the book, the information made sense. It wasn't like you were reading something that he was theorizing on, and he didn't like putting information in that he couldn't collaborate with anything. In fact, he said his style was to try and prove it wrong rather than prove it right. Which again,
instinct.
Who knows?
The Manson story is bullshit, isn't it? I mean, without any research or anything, the whole story thinks is shit from beginning to end.
Yeah, quite possibly all of it was nonsense, and it never happened. Who knows? But
who knows? Yeah,
yeah, we will just never know because we're not in control of the entire story, are we? And when you're not in control of it,
with my 2025 eyes, I'd say, looking at that the whole thing was some kind of stage show. I'm not saying anyone died,
especially with what we know went on in 1960s.
Yeah, it looked like a operation, didn't it? I mean, I remember seeing. I've told you about this. I remember seeing this footage in the golden days of YouTube, and it was when the police raided the Manson, whatever ranch he had or whatever,
Spawn Ranch. Yeah,
and all the cops were dressed in like Hollywood outfits. They weren't even in like cop outfits for that area. They were just in random like cop outfits. I remember seeing the footage. I don't know where you'd find it now.
It is still there, that footage, yeah. In answer to your question, Matt, I don't know. Does it make you suspicious? We're suspicious of everything. That's why we do this, aren't we? You know what I mean? So, and again, like you say, I don't put my all my money into one thing. I'm willing to have my mind changed. But I'm also not one of them people that think, that person, because they've done that and done this, that means they're an agent of the state.
Yeah.
Until they, I mean, we've got big shill mics, so, and on our bullshit platform.
You've got a big shit mic as well, Matt.
Yeah, you've got a big shill mic.
Yeah, I know. I've actually, for the sake of anyone, obviously, who can't see this, I've actually bought a mic stand, and I've never had a mic stand before. This is, I've always held it in my hand.
It's not like Mark's, and he crushes it. Yeah, his knuckles going white with anger. But I know we'll get people contacting us saying, "Oh, Paul is dead," and Paul, but there's no way of proving it. We get that. We get that with flat Earth, because my view is, with whatever the shape of the Earth is, I don't believe the bastards what they're telling me, which is fair enough, NASA and all these other people, but I've never been high enough to look down and say, "Oh, it's that shape."
Yeah.
And that's it. Everything else to me it could be a bigger place. It could be, and I think Chris agrees with me, but you can't definitely say it's this or that, because we've been lied to for that long. And I'm happy with that mentality. That's my view.
And Paul McCartney, whoever it may be, has been putting clues in his work since the Beatles split. There's a number of videos, music videos he's made, whoever he is, album covers, and I've looked into it in a number of articles. I think I spoke about it in podcasts, my Magical Mystery Talk Beatles podcast that I do with Mark and Desiree Hall.
You've got a new one coming out, haven't you?
Yeah, we're going to record it as we speak today. It's December the 11th. We're going to record it on December 15th or 16th, and try and have it out before Christmas, yeah. So, Yeah, I mean, there's if you look at his solo work, there's loads of clues everywhere. So that would say to me that he's doing it deliberately. You know, he's putting it out there for a reason. What that reason is, I don't know. And when I say he, I mean more than one he, because there are more than one. You know, it makes me, you know, all these people that say, isn't it amazing that Paul McCartney's getting up on stage? He's 82 years old and he's performing almost every night on stage for 3 hours without a break. That's amazing for a guy of his age. Well, maybe there's more than one of them doing it. Maybe one of them does it one night, the next one does it the next night. And I don't know. It's
Might be a 25-year-old guy with a mask on.
A Total Recall mask.
And if you're in a stadium and you're right at the back, you're not going to know, are you?
No.
Yeah, could be anyone.
So if you want to get really crazy with this theory, you know, who knows? Who's to say? You know, it's called show business.
Yeah.
You know,
and like the Manson thing, it was at a bloody movie ranch.
Yeah, exactly. They're rubbing it in your face.
Yeah. So when I sort of contacted you and said, do you want to come and do a podcast, and we chose the date, it fell on the sort of annual anniversary of, round about that date anyway, of John Lennon's death. Is it the 8th?
8th, yeah.
8th, yeah. We're recording this on the 11th. It should have been the 10th yesterday when we were going to record it. So I said to you, we'll chat a bit about John Lennon. I had a story when me and Chris moved to the small holding where we were brought up. We lived in a caravan for. I had a caravan for the leg dag. Yeah,
like Alan Partridge.
Yeah, like Alan Partridge, like you said. Yeah.
Aha!
It was a 30-odd foot bloody static caravan like you see at Whitby, or near Great Yarmouth where you used to live. And they lifted it over on a crane. I remember them lifted it. You probably don't remember that, Chris, but lifted it over on a crane and parked it there. We lived in it for 3 years. Anyway, when we moved it, when they finally finished doing the house, my dad did it in his spare time. It was the day that Lennon died, because I remember going back into the caravan and there were radio. I know I've never said this to you, Chris, and Imagine playing on the radio, because obviously they played all his old songs. So that always has, out of every song that the Beatles or anybody ever wrote, that always has an emotional effect on me. Because I remember, from a kid moving from a caravan to a house, it was quite a big.
It was massive. I remember it.
You know what I mean? It was quite a big event in our lives.
Yeah. Remember the first day we slept there because there was no heating. It was fucking freezing.
Yeah, but we had a coal fire, didn't we?
But it was freezing.
There were CO2 criminals.
Yeah.
They've caused global climate warming change.
Don't say the word coal, because YouTube might strike you off.
Especially having a Yorkshire accent.
Sorry, you say that, actually, Don, because I remember the day when we lived in Dewsbury, and I must have only been 4. I remember when Elvis died, because my dad were a massive Elvis fan. And I remember being in the backyard playing and hearing it on the radio, or my mum talked, I can't remember, but I heard it and thinking, oh God, my dad's going to be devastated. Elvis is dead. Because he was a massive Elvis fan. And I literally remember, I must have only been 4-year-old.
Yeah, I remember that as well, yeah.
Yeah, what year did Elvis die?
77, just to make you feel really old.
Yeah, I was born in 73, so 77, it would have been 4.
We're still waiting in nappies.
I remember it. It's weird, isn't it? But that was a traumatic event for me, even though I didn't know really who Elvis was. I just knew my dad were a massive fan.
So John Lennon, I know you had a guy on who'd written a book recently. What's it called again? I forget his name now. But
David Whelan.
David Whelan. I'm saying recently, it was over a year ago, probably, wasn't it?
It was about a year ago as we're recording this, yeah.
How concise do you think his take on it was? Because he's a mainstream journalist. I'm right there, aren't I?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a mainstream journalist.
I'm not asking you to call him out at all, because it was a very interesting podcast and a good listen, actually. I listened to it a couple of times.
Well, I did have my suspicions as well, and I actually wrote I put together, when I found out that there was this mainstream guy that was going to be putting together a book. This is last year, April of last year, that he was going to be writing a book about the assassination of John Lennon, looking at it from a conspiratorial angle, from, you know, challenging the mainstream narrative, as it were. I did put together an article when I found out about this, because it was publicised in the Mail online, which is super, super, super mainstream. If I'm not mistaken, as we speak,
it is the mainstream.
Yeah. It is. The Daily Mail newspaper, as we speak, is Britain's best-selling newspaper. And as
That's the one I have a fleeting look through just to see what's actually
in Clown World.
what bullshit they're trying to sell us, basically.
Clown World Central.
So I was a little bit suspicious, as you would be.
But again,
Why is the mainstream giving this guy a platform to push this narrative, which is challenging the official story of John Lennon's shooting?
Again, the main obviously the main story of John Lennon is he got shot by a lone lunatic. But then there is a mainstream conspiracy as well, isn't there? And then there could be
this is the thing. And I did put together an article where I said I look forward to reading the book when it comes out, but also I'm a little bit suspicious. And I did put this to him when I interviewed him, when I invited him along a few months later. You can find this on ConspiroTV. You can find it via my website, The Occult Beatles. I spoke with him about the book and he was very happy to talk to me. And I said to him, I'm not trying to I'm paraphrasing here, obviously. I'm not trying to out you as some kind of shill, but do you think that they gave you this platform so that they could bring you down, and with you the theory as well? And he says, no, it's not like that. It's not honestly. You have to go and listen to go and listen to it, and you'll. But as I said earlier, I'm not judge and jury. I find this information and I put it out there, and I want the reader and the listener to make up their own mind. Just to give you a bit of context, he used to work. He's based in Britain. He's a British researcher, author. He used to work for Thames Television, which anyone who lives in the UK will be aware of. It was like, it doesn't exist anymore, does it? But it was like one of the big TV channels. Anyone who grew up in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s will remember it. It's all the classic sitcoms. Yeah.
I can still hear the tune.
Yeah, classic sitcoms, quiz shows, you name it, dramas and all of that kind of stuff. It was a London-based regional broadcaster, but it also programs went out across the UK. So he was a researcher there. That's where he started his career, and he's always been into the JFK thing, looking at that, the conspiratorial aspects of that killing, the challenging the official narrative. So basically he's written a book about the conspiratorial aspects surrounding the assassination of John Lennon, basically in a nutshell challenging the mainstream narrative that Mark David Chapman, who's said to be John Lennon's assassin, turned up outside John Lennon's apartment building, the Dakota, on December 8th, 1980. John Lennon walked out of the limo. Mark David Chapman got his gun out and fired him. And this is according to Mark David Chapman, shot him in the back 4 times. He fired 5 times, shot him in the back. John Lennon died inside the actual apartment building. He actually, not in his apartment, he managed to walk up the driveway through the doors into the lobby area, and he died in the office, in the concierge's office. That's where he was found, lying face down. Where do you want me to go? Because I've read the book and I've interviewed the guy on my ConspiroTV channel, and
I don't want it to be a hit piece on the guy with the book. It's more the fact that the information that you know.
I wondered what his opinion was. The guy.
Okay, well, I think it's also fair to say, for the sake of context, is he's actually done the legwork for this. He's spoken to the doctors, the cops, the detectives who were there on the day and directly after. So everyone that was involved in the on the night and directly afterwards. So yeah, the cops that were called out to the scene of the crime, the people that interviewed Chapman in the police station, the detectives. He's spoken to, I think, 1 or 2 of the lawyers that were involved in his defense, or his so-called defense. He's spoken to the doctors that were there that tried to resuscitate Lennon in the hospital. He's spoken to the doctor and the nurses and a couple of other medical stuff. So he's actually done the legwork here.
I think I've heard this guy, Matt. Was a lot of his thing, was it based on the nurses that were there?
Yeah, a lot of
I've heard this guy.
A lot of his work. He's debunked a lot of the official narrative.
It sounded pretty good,
convincing. Yeah, it does. Yeah. And one of the pardon the pun, the killer pieces of information that he's put in his book is with regards to where John Lennon was shot, because we've been told for decades and decades and decades, and Mark Chapman has been told this, which lends itself to the idea, of course, that he might have been mind controlled, which is one of Whelan's conclusions, that he thinks that Chapman was mind controlled. Chapman has been insistent that he shot John Lennon in the back when John Lennon walked out of the limo, walked up the drive towards the Dakota building to go into the door, into the entrance to go into the lobby. He shot him in the back as he was walking up the drive. Problem is that the doctor who, problem for the official narrative, those who support it, is that the doctor who tried to resuscitate Lennon for 45 minutes or so in the A&E stated unequivocally, Dr. David Halloran is his name, that John Lennon was shot in the chest. He was shot in the front. The wounds, the gunshot wounds, 4 gunshot wounds went through his chest, 4 in, 3 out the back. So that in itself is just completely throws the mainstream narrative into the dustbin, or if we're American, into the trash can. This has also been backed up by the 2 nurses that who were there with him on the night.
And it's a pretty big story, isn't it? It's not like Joe Bloggs has come in with 3 gunshot wounds. Oh, just
if I remember
patch him up and get it out. This is John Lennon.
If I
You're going to remember
Matt,
detail.
The 2 nurses that were looked after his body, they were offended because someone came in and took over. Is that right?
I'm not. Yeah, Dr. Stephen Lynn was the head doctor. I think he was the head doctor at that hospital at that time back in 1980. And the story that was pushed for decades and decades, was that Dr. Stephen Lynn, and this is a story that he pushed to the media for years and years, was that he held John Lennon's heart in his hand and tried to massage it to bring John Lennon back to life. And if you look at footage of, and it was in a lot of documentaries at the time, nearer that time when he was shot, and in through the 1980s, from what I recall. If you ever watch documentaries, mainstream documentaries from around that time, you'll see this doctor coming out to announce to the press that John Lennon has just died. He was brought into that particular hospital, and that's Dr. Stephen Lynn. It turned out in about somewhere, I think, 2010 or somewhere around that kind of time, 2012, somewhere around then, that actually Stephen Lynn was lying. He did not actually, if I'm not mistaken, I don't think he even was involved in the resuscitation or the attempted resuscitation of John Lennon. Dr. Halloran, who was a junior doctor or a very young doctor at the time, was the guy that was actually trying to resuscitate Lennon. Stephen Lynn was the head doctor, and he just happened to walk in, and he was a head doctor. He walked in and goes, "Okay, so what's going on here, everybody?" They filled him in on what was going on, and he kind of like stood on the sidelines. And then when it came to announcing it, Halloran claims that he said to Lynn, Halloran says, "I don't want to go out there." You can find this. This has all come out in more recent times. Halloran has been talking about this in the media. Halloran said to Dr. Stephen Lynn, "Look, I don't want to go out and announce this to the press because I'm going to get the blame for not saving John Lennon." So Dr. Stephen Lynn said, "Okay, I'll do it." But then he started embellishing it. Okay, he didn't just go out there and say John Lennon died. He was brought in and he died. He was officially pronounced dead at this said date and time. No, he then went on to say, "I had John Lennon's heart in my hands. I tried to resuscitate him." And this story went on for years and years and years. And eventually Dr. Halloran, David Halloran, says, no, I'm not having this. I've had enough of this. So he came out, he said, "No, I was the one that had, if I'm not mistaken, I was the one that had Lennon's heart in my hands. I was the head doctor. I was essentially the guy that was in charge that night." And the coroner's report, or the autopsy, which is pushing the mainstream narrative, stated that John Lennon was shot in the back. So it pushes this Chapman story that he says that he shot Lennon in the back. But Halloran is insistent that no, he was shot 4 times in the front, 4 in the front, 3 out the back. To make this even more confusing when it comes to comparing the mainstream narrative with the official account, and this is something else, because Whelan has spoken to Halloran. He's actually, in the research of his book, Halloran has said that the 3 wounds that are around his chest, that were around Lennon's chest, were in a quote unquote tight professional grouping. So this would suggest that whoever it was that shot John Lennon was a professional marksman. So Whelan said to me that he said to Halloran, "Okay, well then, let's go with this mainstream narrative and see if we can make it fit. Okay, let's say that this official narrative is true. Is it possible, okay, that maybe Chapman shot Lennon in the front? Maybe when John Lennon walked past Chapman, Chapman said, 'Hello, Mr. Lennon,' and John Lennon turned around and then he shot at him and it hit him in the chest." To which Halloran and I'm paraphrasing here, Halloran said, "No, it's just not possible. First off, if he's going to turn around and someone's shooting at him, he's not just going to stand there and allow 3 shots in a quote unquote tight professional grouping to hit him. He's going to move. He's going to try and run away. He's going to try and flinch. He's going to jerk. He's not just going to stand there and say, 'Oh, okay, then give me a tight professional grouping. Then go on, off you go.'" So again, and he says even if he did turn around and he shot him in the chest, and he didn't flinch, you would not get it that tight. The quote that Whelan got off Halloran is, "Not even a Navy SEAL could make that type professional grouping from where Chapman was standing." We're talking magic bullets here. So we're going back to JFK and the magic bullet. There's no way that could have happened. Another thing that Halloran busted out of the water when it comes to the mainstream account is that according to the mainstream officially pushed account, Chapman was 20 to 30 feet away from John Lennon when he shot him. Halloran says, "No, that's not possible. He would have had to have been 2 to 3 feet away from John Lennon to have got that type professional grouping, 4 in, 3 out the back." So he also said, and he told David Whelan, and this is all in the interview that I did with David Whelan. It's in his book. He said, not only that, but he would have dropped down dead as soon as those shots fired into him from 2 to 3 feet. That tight professional grouping. He would have dropped down dead there and then. He would have died instantly. But he didn't. So he came out of the car. He was shot in the driveway. Okay, so if you can envisage the outside of the Dakota, so you've got a driveway.
It's like an arch between the building, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. So you've got a driveway, and before you get to the archway entrance that takes you inside, not inside the building, but inside the entrance, so you've got a roof. You on your left as you're facing it, you've got the doorman's booth, which is where Jose Perdomo was standing. So you go through that driveway underneath the archway, and then you go a fair few yards walking, if you're walking, and then you get to the double doors that take you inside into the reception area. So you walk down that driveway, and then okay, so this is the way Halloran describes it in when I spoke to him. He goes, okay, so we're supposed to believe that John Lennon, who was shot through the heart and who was meant to have died instantly, right, in the driveway by Chapman, so it's claimed, then manages to walk down that driveway, past the doorman's booth, under the archway, a fair few yards down the driveway, turns right, opens the vestibule doors, 2 double doors. He has to pull them open. And it should also be noted at this point, I think, and forgive me if I'm remembering this wrong, Halloran stated that the wounds would have actually disabled one of John's arms. So he wouldn't have been able to use his left arm. I think it was paralyzed because the arteries would have been damaged. So he walks down the driveway, past the doorman's booth, under the archway. This is a guy who's been shot 4 times and he's meant to have died instantly. Under the archway, a few more yards down the driveway, turns right, pulls open the vestibule doors, okay, with his disabled arms, walks up a steep staircase to go into then opens 2 oak doors, okay, walks through the oak doors, goes into the reception area, turns left, goes to the concierge's desk, past the concierge's desk into the concierge's office, and then says, "I've been shot," and drops down dead.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable.
Yeah,
I suppose because the official story was that where he was shot, there was a concierge booth, And then you can immediately put it into your head that the booth equals a concierge office. So you just dodged in there without that bit that you explained, where there is a concierge outside, but also inside. But
they missed the important part of the 100-yard walk and
fucking 100-meter
the
walk before you get
3 doors you've got to go and flight of stairs.
The story about the heart massage, you could put that down to human ego. I don't even think that needs to be conspiratorial, does it? It could be just that doctor's, he's got a bit of fame and he's just run with it. But because I have heard this guy, I've heard this story from him some time ago. I don't think it was on your channel though, Matt. But was it something about Yoko Ono as well? Did she?
Oh my God, that's wow. I'll just basically one of the conclusions he puts forward that according to his investigation is that he thinks there was a second shooter, right? He doesn't think it was Jose Padermo, although he's very suspicious of Jose Padermo. He thinks he was possibly some kind of handler for Chapman, like a mind control handler. This is what Whelan
he was
thinks.
military, wasn't he? When he ex-military.
No, not that Padermo. There was no. One of the reasons he doesn't think Padermo was there to shoot John Lennon was because Padermo actually started working at the Dakota in 1969. Right. So John Lennon wasn't even in America He didn't move to America till 1971.
That's a long way.
It's a long operation. It's a long project.
Well, they were mixing the Padermo with the guy who was in Operation Phoenix, weren't they?
Yeah, they're mixing it all
Ted
up.
Shockley's thing.
Right. Yeah, apparently Jose Padermo is a very common name. And I've looked into this and it is quite common. There's a lot of Jose Padermos out there. And it could be that that one from the Bay of Pigs who's said to have shot Lennon, the CIA guy, was actually might have even faked his name. If you're an intelligence officer, why would you keep the same name and go and shoot John Lennon? You'd change your name, wouldn't you? Yeah. So basically, David Whelan thinks that there was a second shooter, and he thinks that Chapman was mind controlled into thinking that he'd shot and killed Lennon, but actually he was firing blanks. Another weird anomaly. And that kind of ties in, because that must mean there was a second shooter. If he was shot in the front, if Chapman was standing behind Lennon, which some witnesses, if I'm not mistaken, have said, how did that happen? Was it magic bullets? So the other thing that is a little bit weird, and there's lots of things that are a little bit and very weird, is the bullets. It recently, I think it was in 2012, the New York police, because of course the Dakota is in New York, released some of the bullets. Now, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm going by memory here because there's so much information to remember. Chapman claims that he was using hollow point bullets. The police released the bullets in public. You can find this online. There are photographs available. And there's a hollow point bullet, but there's also a normal regular lead bullet. So what's that all about? If Chapman claims he was only firing one set of bullets, where did this other?
It's strange because if a murder happens, they normally can't prosecute the murder unless they've got all the ducks in a row, etc., etc. Whereas all these murders like Magic Bullet Theory and John Lennon and Martin Luther King, there's all these holes in the. They would never have probably been able to convict these people under normal circumstances, like Mark David Chapman. Anyway, sorry. Yoko Ono.
Right. Well, wait just a few seconds, because I knew you might ask me about this, and I've got some notes here, because a lot of this stuff is so convoluted, and I don't want to get the best thing to do is either go listen to the podcast that I did with David. He goes into it a lot in there, or go read the book, Mind Games: The Assassination of John Lennon. But I think in total, Yoko Ono has given 4 statements about what she said she witnessed. These are 4 statements to the police or detectives, if I'm not mistaken, or perhaps lawyers as well, law chiefs and DA's office and all that kind of stuff. And each and every one of those statements is completely different. And what Whelan stresses, what's very important, and this is to quote him, he says her statements are contradictory and muddled. That's what he says. Now, this is what according to one version, No, all right, okay. And however contradictory and muddled each of those four statements are that she's given, what's really interesting is in none of those statements has she ever said she saw Chapman shoot her husband. Not once. Okay, so in one of those accounts that she's given, she says that so John Lennon walked out of the limo towards the Dakota, up the driveway, walked past Chapman, and Yoko would have been kind of behind Chapman. So he was a fair way ahead of her, although some accounts actually say that she was ahead of him. So it's really confusing. There's just so many different versions of what happened. So he's well ahead, she's behind him, but Chapman is ahead of her. So he's standing there on the driveway kind of area, and he shoots John in the back. That's what she says. Well, she doesn't say Chapman shoots John in the back. She just says John is shot. So Whelan's asking, well, okay, so what? So, because then what Yoko does is she walks with John into the Dakota. So what? So there's a guy standing next to her who's shooting a gun, and she walks past this bloke who's been shooting a gun, even though she's never said that she's seen him shooting the gun. But even if there's a second shooter and they're shooting from the front and it's not, she doesn't run away, she doesn't scream, she doesn't try to apprehend Chapman if it's him. She walks past Chapman to catch up with John so they can walk in together into the building. So even if there is a second shooter and he's standing in front of John, why is she walking with him in the line of fire? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So I still can't get my head around that, and I just hope I haven't recounted it wrong, because it just doesn't. It's just so bloody nonsensical.
Yeah, that was it, Matt. It was something along them lines. Yeah,
So in other accounts that she's given, there's one or two accounts where she says they didn't hear gunshots until they got in through the doors. You know, those entrance doors with the steps that lead up and the oak doors and all of that jazz. So they didn't hear gunshots until they were in that area. So then that would suggest, if that's true, that flies in the face of the official theory, because basically that says that the gunshots didn't happen on the drive when Chapman was standing outside, shot him in the back, and so on and so on. That means that it happened when they were well away from Mark Chapman, where he was standing, and it was, well, you know, as you say, Dom, 30, 40 yards away and inside the actual building. So he's not even on the drive. So again, it's magic bullets. How can Chapman shoot him when he's standing on the drive if John Lennon is inside the building? So according to Yoko, in a couple of accounts, she said that they heard gunshots when they got inside, once they got inside, and she thought it was a car tire going off, a burst car tire. But as Whelan says,
bang, bang,
what?
Bang, bang.
What? There were 5 shots, gunshots. So she heard what? She heard what? So she heard 5 car tires go off. What? What? And according to
story nailed down,
it's just weird. And then the other thing that Whelan asks is where was she? Because when the police turned up and they found Lennon lying flat on the ground, his face down in a pool of blood, as it's quoted, she wasn't there. So why wasn't she next to her husband, crying and screaming and trying to help him and trying to get help? Where was Yoko? Where was she? Why wasn't she next to her husband? So there's all these like weird things, but as he says, in every account she's given, the 4 statements she's given to the law, as it were, not once has she ever said that she saw Mark Chapman shooting a gun or shooting her husband. Yeah,
and she's the main witness, isn't she?
I reckon Yoko.
Or one of them, anyway.
Do you reckon she might have done
one of them. There's a really interesting statement. There's this thing, a documentary. It's called The US versus John Lennon, and basically it's a documentary, mainstream documentary, but it's a documentary that looks into John Lennon's political episode of his life where he was doing these, where he wrote "Give Peace a Chance" in 1969, and he was taking part in peace protests and political rallies, and when he was getting quite radical with his
advertising
politics.
banners, it wasn't it? I think.
Yeah, advertising banners that said "Happy Christmas, war is over," and all that kind of stuff. And he was he was campaigning against the Nixon government, and he was being followed by the FBI. That later came out. He had a suspicion in the 70s that the FBI were following him, because he says, you know, he would say on the mainstream media in interviews, he would say, "I'm absolutely certain I'm being followed, because every time I pick the phone up, I can hear clicking. And I walk down and there's lots of plumbers and electricians who are suddenly wanting to fix things in the apartment block where I live, you know, all of a sudden."
Were they trying to deport him as well, Matt, I think?
Yeah, the US immigration services tried to have him kicked out of America in the 70s because he wanted to live there. And it's turned out there's a researcher who went through the courts in the 80s and 90s and got freedom of information access, and discovered that the FBI were indeed surveilling him during the 70s. And the US immigration services, yes, were trying to throw him out. He won in the end. He got his American green card.
It's not going well, though, is it?
Yeah, exactly. Well, there's a twist to that as well, which not a lot of people are aware of. So yeah, it turns out the FBI were following him, and yes, the U.S. immigration services. All of this was being backed by President Nixon. Then President Nixon. Nixon was actually signing off for this. So it was coming from up on high. The thing with the green card is, yes, he got a green card in 1975 to stay in the States, but from what I understand, he wasn't going to get the actual naturalization. I know I'm saying this wrong, but you get a green card to stay in the States, but then you have to get a final piece of documentation, like another card that actually states that you are a US citizen, that officially, and that he was meant to get in 1981. So a year before he's shot dead. Yeah, so a year after he was shot dead, that's when he was meant to be getting this card that would have said, okay, you can stay in America. Anyway, in this documentary, which charts a lot of this, Yoko Ono at the end, they're talking about John being shot, and she says they shot him. That's all she says. She says they shot him. Now, what does she mean by they? Does she mean more than one gunman? Or does she mean the government, the powers that be, quote unquote? What does she mean by they shot him?
Even, yeah.
Or a group of people, a cabal, perhaps? What does she mean by that? You know,
she's a strange character, though, isn't she?
Yeah.
She's very strange. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, she looked and dressed like a witch. Didn't she bring an album out saying, "I am a witch"?
Yeah. Yes, I am a witch.
Yes,
I think
am
it's
a witch.
called. Yeah, and there's the B-side of one of the John Lennon singles that came out in the 80s, and it's called "Kiss, Kiss, Kiss." And as someone has noted, if you play the vinyl and you turn and you play it backwards, "Kiss, Kiss, Kiss," what does that become? "Sick, sick, sick."
Oh yeah.
Never ending, is it?
Another thing to throw into it is, and I've seen that piece of footage, I don't know where, of Paul McCartney when they told him that he died, and it was pretty, you know, he just kind of fobbed
almost
it off,
nonchalant.
Yeah,
he says it's a drag. He said it's a drag.
Yeah,
it's a drag, and he never went to his father's funeral in 1976 when he died. He never went to his funeral, which is odd.
Was that Paul McCartney? Paul McCartney didn't.
Yeah. And this is one of the reasons why people say that's not the real Paul McCartney, because the real James Paul McCartney would have gone to his father's funeral. Yeah, maybe, but again, people are now going to say that Matt Sergiou. What have you got him on there for? He's a shill. But you know,
they're all shills, Matt. We get called shills.
Opinions. I tell you something that is funny, Matt. You've got a picture of Paul McCartney and John Lennon behind you, and as you were talking at certain poents and you were moving around, it was wobbling. You noticed that, though? You were almost like it looked like John Lennon were going, "Yes, yes, tell the story." Every time you got more excited, it was going.
Yeah, I've got a birthday card, a John and Paul birthday card on behind me. Which is taped to my filing cabinet. Yeah,
you have the same problem we have it with Batman. People still buy me Batman memorabilia, but now I'm 50 odd. You know, it's a Batman fan.
Well, I can even make this birthday card, which it's a Beatles birthday card. I can make that into a conspiracy. I can turn that into a conspiracy story as well. But I'll go off into another thing.
Another world.
That was Another World, because that picture was taken by David Bailey.
Right. Yes.
And it was part, and anyone who's seen this picture, it's basically, it was taken in 1965, I think, by looking at the way they look on it. Using my geekiness, I would say that's 1965.
Train spotterish,
yeah, train spotter. And it's a picture of Paul and John with his head resting on top of Paul's head.
It's that black and white
was
David Bailey style.
It's David Bailey, and it's taken from a box set of pictures he released in 1965, I think, called Pin-Ups, I think it was called, or something like that. And also featured in that, basically, it was a collection of photographs of the 60s icons of Britain. So you had Michael Caine's in there, and also the Cray twins.
Right.
The Cray twins. That, you know, that famous picture of Reggie and Ronnie, black and white, where one is standing behind the other one. That's the David Bailey picture. David Bailey actually was the photographer at, is it Reggie's? Is it Reggie? Was he the one that got married?
Yeah, I think it was Reggie. Yeah.
Oh, his actual wedding.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he was the wedding photographer for that.
So he was the less crazy one, not the gay crazy one.
Yeah, apparently the less crazy one. Yeah.
But that style of David Bailey, that black and white style, you can Michael Caine, you can see how loads of different people were doing in that style, can't they?
And it's been claimed by people who were close to the Crays. I think there was a crime boss who was based in Scotland, and this is featured in a book written by a guy who was very closely connected to the Cray twins, and he claims, or this guy, this crime lord that he spoke to, claims that back in 1963, Brian Epstein was actually the Cray twins wanted to manage the Beatles. Because they thought that there was a lot of money. It's very strange.
I mean, when I first moved to London, the amount of people that went to school with the Crays or lived next door to them, they fucking must have been surrounded by houses, because I met so many people who said, "Oh yeah, my uncle lived next door to Crays."
Yeah,
oh,
I know. My father-in-law, his dad used to have an illegal gambling den on King's Cross in the 60s. This was back in the day. Now, of course, it's all gentrified, King's Cross in London. But back then,
I tell you what, Matt, I remember King's Cross, and I went to London in the 90s. I remember King's Cross not being, I mean, it was still a dodgy shithole then.
Oh, God, it was such, it was, because my auntie lives just down the road in Caledonian Road, which is near Holloway. That's you know.
I remember me and my mates going out, getting drunk and going for a kebab, and I had to go to a cash point to get some money. And this very young girl, and we're all talking like mid-90s, you know, would you? And I went, "Oh, come on, man!" You know, this young girl basically offered, you know, prostitution services.
Yeah, it was really dark and dank. Yeah, you know, dark and dank really down young. King's Cross. Now it's, since they've rebuilt the train station
in the kebab shop, and I said, "You won't believe this young girl just," and my mate went, "How much?" You're missing the fucking point, are you?
Did you get it free with the kebab? I don't know.
No, it was rough around
I better not go down there. It's like Greg Wallace, territory. So my father-in-law, he was Greek Cypriot. He's passed away now, bless him. And they moved from Cyprus to London. He came with his dad, so he practically grew up in London in the 60s. And they had an illegal gambling den. Yeah, I'm laughing, but that's what it was. It was a cafe. You could go in there and have a cup of coffee and stuff, and it used to stay up until late. And all the Greeks used to go in there, because there was a lot of Greeks in the 60s, immigrants coming to work in restaurants as waiters and stuff. My dad was one of them.
Then they opened kebab shops.
And they opened kebab shops and restaurants and did really well. And it was, it doubled up as a gambling joint. So, you know, and every time a copper walked past, the gambling table would be turned over, and they'd put tablecloth on the top and put a couple of teacups on the top. It was one of those sort of places. But he remembers walking out of that cafe one day in King's Cross, and this bloke running down the road with blood streaming down his face. And he found out later that he refused to pay protection money to the Cray brothers.
That worked well for him.
Yeah, that went well for him. Yeah. So they cut his face up. Yeah.
Weird how I mean, even going back to, they made 2 films about him. Why are they idolized when they literally?
Well, there were no trouble in London when Crays were around, Chris.
Oh yeah, well, they get such a bad rap, you know. But they looked after their own. They did. They looked after their own.
Yeah, unless you didn't want to pay them their extortion money.
Yeah. Stab you in the face.
Or if you're an underage boy. Yeah.
I
mean, we've all been guilty of this, aren't we? Idolizing gangsters. It's weird. And then you watch. I mean, I used to love gangster films. I watch them now totally differently. You just think you're a bunch of selfish, evil bastards.
Yeah. Well, like everything. We're going back to Mark David Chapman. Was bloody 2 presentations about Assassin's Creed, about how all these pop stars are all related to these so-called would-be assassin stroke lone killer stroke serial killers.
And the obsession with assassins. Why have got this obsession with gangsters and assassins in
I think it was Kevin Bacon that got me on that one. Kevin Bacon, when I looked into his genealogy, that he's related to Mark David Chapman. He's a cousin of his. And then so's what they call female singer, Chris, that lanky bird who thinks a bloke. Taylor Swift. She's related to him and I think Jeffrey Dahmer.
Yeah, I looked into this briefly when I did a Magical Mystery Talk podcast with Mark and Desiree a few years back. We did a 2-part John Lennon assassination.
Thought you'd beat me to it.
Yeah. Well, no, because you've added to it.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, you've added to it. Yeah, I looked at the genealogy, Mark Chapman's genealogy, and I can't remember now who was on it now.
Yeah.
I don't have it in front of me.
The other thing is, who's the guy that shot Reagan? What were he called now?
John Hinckley.
John Hinckley Jr., right?
Yeah.
He's a cousin of Nancy Reagan. He's a cousin of Nancy Reagan.
And isn't he related in some way to Chapman, or have I got that wrong?
Yeah, they're cousins. Yeah.
And didn't you say they look alike? They look alike, don't they?
Yeah, they look alike, yeah.
They do look alike. And this is interesting because the assassination attempt on Reagan was just, 3 or 4 months after John Lennon was shot.
Right.
And if you look at Hinckley and Chapman, they look almost alike. And the thing with Hinckley is that, and I've got some notes here, and I'll try and find them because, where are they? I know they're here somewhere.
You're like me, you.
I know. I'm going to try and
fucking all over the place.
Right, I'm going to have to walk away from the mic. Let me just find it.
If you can just envision Matt's room, it's just like a load of bookshelves, loads of papers hanging off it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my life. That is now. That's my life. I can't find them now.
It's not,
anyway, the thing is,
shoot from the hip, Matt.
Yeah, shoot from the hip. I'll probably find them in a minute. I'll rummage around as I'm talking. The thing with Hinckley is that what most people know about Hinckley is that he was obsessed with Jodie Foster. That's what...
the Taxi Driver connection.
Yeah, the Taxi Driver, the movie, the connection to that. And it said that the reason that he shot Reagan or tried to kill him was because it was
Reagan reminded him of Jodie Foster.
Yeah. Or maybe it does in Hot Pants, I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's what led him to shoot Reagan. I don't know why.
Wasn't he
I don't
obsessed
know what
with Taxi Driver? Was there a Taxi Driver connection? I've just made that up.
I don't know.
But it's a very similar story, isn't it?
Well, Jodie Foster in Taxi Driver.
But didn't De Niro went to shoot a politician?
That's right. Yeah.
So I think that came after, and
so did one of Manson's so-called family. But
now you just think of predictive programming, don't you? Now,
yeah.
No.
So, but what a lot of people don't know, not a lot of people know that, is that he also had an obsession with John Lennon, and the reason that I'm scurrying about trying to find my notes is because I've got quotes from Hinckley, and I think it's important to say it in a quote from him instead of me mouthing off and getting it completely wrong, as I'm probably getting all of this wrong, or everything I've said. During his trial for the assassination attempt, the court were told that in February 1981, he'd stood outside the Dakota building on the spot where John Lennon was killed with a gun in his pocket. Okay, so this is 2 months after John Lennon was shot. He went to outside the Dakota with a gun in his pocket, wanting to, and I quote, destroy himself. According to mainstream news reports, in May 81, shortly after the attempt on Reagan's life, law officials had revealed after interviews with Hinckley that he was, and I quote, obsessed with the death of John Lennon and in his mind binded together the slain Beatles star and Jodie Foster. And he's quoted as saying, my life is screwed up. The world is even more screwed up. I don't know why people want to live. John Lennon is dead. I still think about Jodie all the time. That's all I think about, really. That and John Lennon's death. They were sort of binded together. They were sort of binded together before December the 8th. They've been binded together since last summer, really. John and Jodie binded together, and now one of them's dead. And when police investigated Hinckley's hotel room, seems to be a bit of a... because they did the same with Chapman after he shot John Lennon, because Chapman didn't come from New York. He came from Hawaii. He flew all over from Hawaii, which incidentally has about 11 naval and military bases on it, between somewhere around that number. Interesting that he would choose to go to Hawaii, even though he was born in Texas, I think, and lived in Atlanta somewhere. So, yeah, when they checked out... we all know the Catcher in the Rye narrative, don't we? That it's claimed that Chapman was mind controlled to shoot Lennon, and even the mainstream goes with this. Yeah, that Catcher in the Rye, the book, the novel, the short novel, was what programmed Chapman to kill John Lennon, and Chapman has spoken about this over the years. When they raided Hinckley's hotel room, or went to post shooting of Reagan, when they went into his hotel room, they found a number of books, one by John Lennon, and I think they also found a poster of John Lennon on the wall, and they also found a copy of The Catcher in the Rye. So my contention is, given that both those guys looked alike at the time, Hinckley and Chapman, is it possible that they could have been programmed to shoot either? So they could have been switched over. Chapman could have easily been used to shoot Reagan, and Hinckley vice versa. You know,
I mean, you would never know what operations they've got planning or what they're trying to turn them on to do, and maybe one was better placed for the other, for the one. You know, like he was better placed for Lennon, and he was better placed for Reagan. But he's still got the programming for the Lennon kill. Yeah.
And there are more links when you look at them those two together, because of course, as you might know, Hinckley, the day of the shooting of Reagan, Reagan's vice president, George H.W. Bush, George Bush Sr., his son Neil was reported in the mainstream, was all set to have lunch, I think it was, with one of the Hinckley family, because it turns out that the Bushes and the Hinckley's are friends, very close friends. Let's not forget that George Bush Sr. was the head of the CIA. Let's not forget that in the mid-70s he was the head of the CIA. That is a fact. And so, this dinner was cancelled because they've got heart. They care. Now, the thing is, John Hinckley's father, John W. Hinckley Sr., also known as Jack, he was a wealthy businessman. He was involved in the energy business, so oil and gas business. And he also became, it's reported, quite a major active member of a Californian-based sort of Christian-flavoured relief and development agency called World Vision. And it's actually claimed that Hinckley Sr. was the president of the board of World Vision. So basically what World Vision, I think they're still around, what they used to do and probably still do if they're still around, is like quote unquote missionary works, good works around the world, especially for war-torn kind of areas. I'm looking through my notes here.
So fucking dodges.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So and you probably know where I'm going to go with this. It's been claimed that it's been used covertly by the CIA in Vietnam, for example, during the Vietnam and directly after it. Also in Cuba. I've got a quote here from an article. I can't remember where I got this article from because this is quite a few years ago. I'm looking at some old notes, and I quote, World Vision had a hand in the movement of the Cubans into the United States and other refugees of revolutionary regimes. World Vision was able to...
Hands off Cuba. Yeah,
Cuba. So back to Jose Padermo again. World Vision was able to recruit out of these mercenary populations people who could be politically turned to their intelligence purposes. World Vision has served as a covert penetration force for the CIA, going in as missionaries and working among the people. And with regards to the Vietnam War, according to the book, I've got an excerpt from a book here, Spiritual Warfare by Sarah Diamond. She says, in tandem with its food distribution and leadership training for indigenous believers, World Vision has, on a number of occasions, functioned as an intelligence gathering arm of the US government. In the 70s, World Vision was charged with having collected field data for the CIA in Vietnam. After US troops left the region, World Vision played a major role in the administration of refugee camps. And this is where Mark Chapman comes in, maybe, because in the 70s, because Chapman used to work for the YMCA, he was a volunteer for the YMCA in his younger years. And following the end of the Vietnam War, he worked with the CIA, in conjunction with the CIA, at a refugee settlement camp at Fort Chaffee, in the US. And basically what he did, he was kind of like a camp counselor. He was really good with children, actually. He was like
camp commander. The camp commander. Yeah.
So this would have been around the time that World Vision and the CIA would have been up to no good with refugee camps. So we got Chapman in amongst all of this at around the same time that World Vision were doing what they were doing with the CIA. So is it possible that so I'm not saying is it possible, I'm just putting it forward as a possibility that we have these links, not only with the John Lennon links with Hinckley and Chapman, this obsession that they both had with Lennon. We also have this connection with World Vision and CIA and relief camps and all of that. So yeah, it's quite smelly,
I can't
really,
help
isn't
thinking
it?
of Scarface when you're on about that, Matt. Scarface, you bringing him over from Cuba.
Yeah.
No, you think about that whole story. I mean, I've talked about it in a podcast that Scarface were basically a cocaine advertisement in the 80s, wasn't it?
You have to make cocaine cool.
Yeah, but also just another angle is, he came over from Cuba, didn't it? And put in a camp and then rose up through the thing. Written by Oliver Stone, by the way, Scarface. Yeah. You just made me think of it. Sorry,
you need people like me. You need people like me.
Look at them flamingos fly.
You fucking cockroach.
Oh no, pelicans. Look at the pelican fly.
Look at the bad guy. Look at the bad guy.
Again, I love that film, but
I love it.
Yeah, great film.
I suppose it has got. It's a dark film, but it is redemption in it. I suppose.
I don't know. It's quite light where he gets that chainsaw out and he's in the bath.
No, but the point is, he redeems him. He's a psychopathic.
Hero, psychopathic hero.
He redeems himself. I'm going to say redeems himself because he didn't blow them kids up, but then he murders his sister, doesn't he? So,
I mean, The Godfather. I love The Godfather. That's my all-time favorite movie.
I watched it recently. I watched it the other day.
Yeah, but even that is kind of looked up as a kind of cool film. How many people I know, because I come from a Greek Cypriot background, loads of Greek Cypriot youngsters in their 20s and 30s who aspire to it,
We've all done it, Matt. We've all looked at them and thought, oh, you watch them older when you're older. I watched Godfather a couple of weeks ago. I mean, Mrs. ended up watching it, and I saw it differently this time. I didn't see it as I saw it as like the dad is just he did what was necessary in a period of time
to make a living.
And then the son Michael is actually evil.
Yeah.
He's actually the dark one. But I also saw it as a family film, like the dad and his kids. I saw it from totally different eyes.
From a Greek Cypriot angle, for me, even though I was born and have lived in Britain all my life, but coming from first generation Cypriots, I see some of the because Italians and Greeks are very
it's the immigration story,
connected.
Isn't it?
It's the immigration. So the way they eat dinner and all the little nuances, the way they act within the family with each other, the behavioural tics, if you like. It's so Greek Cypriot in a lot of ways.
The way I saw it, was like not when I first watched it, but certainly since we've been doing this work over the last 4 or 5 years on the podcast, is it looked like a possession because Michael Corleone did not want to be that guy. We're trying to talk himself out, and he got sort of drawn into it and then possessed. Then he became what he never wanted to become, which is go on,
what I've noticed is I'll say sorry because I do cut into people a lot. Sorry,
so do we.
But I just
we just don't apologise.
Yeah. we get bollocked by listeners for being ignorant, or some of them.
Yeah, or CIA because of the microphone.
Yeah. I blame the shill mics.
Yeah, that's it, shill mics. So I don't know if you've noticed this, but if you watch Michael before he gets sucked into the world of being a gangster, when he's trying to fight against it and live a quote unquote honest life, he looks, and then compare the way he looks there facially to the way he becomes when he becomes the boss of bosses. When you look at him when he's a boss of bosses, his face is pale. It's like they've
Black
set the
eyes,
lighting.
Yeah, black eyes,
Yeah, black eyes. They've made him look pale, like all the blood has been drawn out of him. And then you compare him to when he was younger, when he was this guy with ideals, and he's tanned and he's got his hair is nicely combed. It's quite kind of fluffy, and it's like he's just
my missus pointed out an interesting point, which was when Marlon Brando were in his office, that dark office, and he's got plants and goldfish, and he's feeding the fish there and stuff. When Michael, and I've never noticed this before, when Michael Corleone becomes the main guy, there's guys stripping everything out of the room. They're taking out the plants and the fish tank, like, because I don't know what it means, but they're basically stripping all the humanity and anything. They're just taking everything out, and they're actually doing it. You can see them doing it, taking out all the stuff out of it.
I remember the scene now. He's saying that.
Yeah. And you think, fucking hell, what a detail. What a fantastic. Another detail me and Mrs. pissed herself at was, if you remember, he's with Diane Keaton. I think they're in New York.
Well, they're dancing like that.
They come out of a cinema. They come out of the cinema. They must have seen And Diane Keaton says, would you prefer me more if I look like Ingrid Bergman? And he goes, no, not really. You just think, fucking same shitty weird conversations with your missus. Back then, it might have been 40s. Would you prefer me more if I look like if you prefer me more if I look like Pamela Anderson? No.
Exactly. This is 1972.
There's another bit later on where he's surrounded by gangsters, and she rings him and goes, I love you. And he's like, yeah, okay, bye. And she's like, I love you. He's like,
And then what's it? Clemenza says, go on, tell the girl you love her. I love her with all of my heart. And that bit is so Greek Cypriot as well. You know, Greek Cypriots ribbing at it, taking the piss out of each other. Go on, where's your girlfriend? Go on, I love you. I want to kiss you. You know, so all these little nuances that just. You know.
It's still a good film.
It is.
But there were films that were made like, you know, but there are, as Mark been going through all the Kubrick films and stuff like that, there's obviously a high level of directorship and production in them films in comparison to now, but there isn't any. Just empty.
Well, you miss it. As everyone knows, I'm sure, listeners, I've always been a film fanatic, but there's something missing now when, like I said, I watched the, recent Indiana Jones film, for instance. I watched it reluctantly. I've been an Indiana Jones fan my whole life. And they're out at sea on a boat, and you can see it's a green screen. You're like, you couldn't even be asked to get a fucking boat out into the sea to make a $200 million film. You know, it has to be green screen. And it loses something, doesn't it? It loses that connection that you have.
Reality.
Yeah.
But just before we finish, as you know, I mean, we've been talking about the Huxley stuff, and you've been doing a lot of work on the Bloomsbury Group and all that type of stuff. And the reason, one of the things, the directions we're going off now, we've been discussing this, is on the Huxley's obviously on Sergeant Pepper. So I had an idea that the next Huxley ones would be around that detail, that connection there. And we started looking into some, I know you've got a lot of stuff on the Asher family. Some really good stuff. And I did the Bloodlines of Jane Asher, which turned up some really interesting information.
You shared some of it.
Just frightening information. We've done John Lennon as well recently for Mark. But yeah, that family, the Ashers, they're just an interesting. It's a strange. Just the one story about how the mother was teaching. What they call him, and then he ends up managing, and Paul McCartney's in the house. It's like, what are the odds on? What would the odds be on Martin being taught by Jane Asher's mother, and then going out with Paul McCartney while Martin's managing, producing all the songs? Yeah,
it's just a mind boggle.
And that Richard Asher is obviously, although again we can't prove this. This is a bit like the Paul is dead stuff. But it looks like he was part of some kind of British version, Tavistock version of MK Ultra.
Yeah. There's just so many connections. It's just where do you start? And
Paul's waking up in the coming up. Did you write that song, John? No, I didn't. Where have I heard that song before? It must be my song then.
I wrote it in my dreams, and it just turns out that Dr. Richard Asher was a pioneer of sleep hypnosis, and hypnosis as well. So and he's living in the house with Jane Asher in the family house, or the Asher's house in Wimpole.
I mean, how many? I know people, because, like you say, you're obsession with liking the Beatles to start with, and Mike Williams as well, and all these people. But then when you start looking and pulling threads, you're thinking that can't possibly happen just to one or two or three people in their lifetime. So it certainly doesn't happen to you, Chris, or me.
Well, here's another one, a weird Asher link. That's because there's loads of them, but this is just another one that makes you think it was all preordained. Ivan Vaughan is his name. I think I've got it right. Ivan Vaughan was a school friend, and he's the one, according to the mainstream Beatles story, that introduced Paul to John Lennon. So, and then the Beatles were born. So he was a school friend of Paul's, I think, but he knew John, and he took Paul to a garden fete, where John's group, the Quarrymen, were playing in the 1950s when they were teenagers. And he knew that John might appreciate meeting Paul because he was a musician as well. He was 14 years old at the time, so he was responsible for them two hooking up, and hence we get the Beatles. That's according to the official story. Fast forward a few years. Ivan goes to university. I think it was university, and he goes to London, and Paul McCartney goes to visit him, and this is before Paul McCartney becomes famous. This is 61, 62, somewhere around that time, before they get a record contract. And he decides to go down to London to see his old mate, Ivan, who's at university, and he's staying in a flat, and I think it's in Portland Place or Portland Street in London. I can't remember the exact address. Turns out that the exact same flat where he was living was the flat where the Ashers lived before they moved out and went to Wimpole Street, I think, where Paul then moved in with Jane Asher when he became a famous Beatle. So what are the chances of that? And to make a living because he was a student at university, he got a part-time job at the Establishment Club, which is one of the very first comedy clubs in London that was doing kind of satire. Club. Exactly.
The clues in Ministry of Sound.
Yeah, the clues in the name, which was started by Peter Cook. Peter Cook was a comedian, obviously a comedy writer. He was also part of the comedy troupe of the early 60s, Beyond the Fringe, which also included Dudley Moore and Alan Bennett, and Jonathan Miller. Jonathan Miller, before he joined Beyond the Fringe, was at Cambridge University. I think half of Beyond the Fringe were from Cambridge University. Surprise, surprise, so-called elite college. They were either from Oxford or Cambridge. So Jonathan Miller was studying medicine, and he was going to become a doctor. And he was assigned as a student, I think, or he'd actually passed his exams, and he was sent to a hospital. I think it was the Central Middlesex Hospital. Off the top of my head, I might be wrong. But
I like it when you say it. I think it was.
I don't want to.
You fucking know it was.
Well, I don't know. I might have got. I don't know. Sometimes I do wonder.
I wonder how I can remember shit.
Yeah,
so I have to say I think it was that because
you just don't want to get it wrong, because this is important information. I think.
Yeah, it is.
So he goes to kind of he's passed his exams, but he's still kind of under the tutelage. He's assigned to a doctor under the tutelage of a doctor. According to Jane Asher, that doctor was her dad, Dr. Richard Asher. So, again, we've got this, and it turns out that Dr. Richard Asher was involved in MK Ultra type experiments in the early 60s, using drugs on young people to see the effects of them, and also joining him in these. This is an allegation put forward by someone who claims he was one of the people that was being experimented on. Came forward to a couple of websites and put this information out. Claims that Dr. Richard Asher was part of that group. The other doctors involved were also William Sargent, who is, if you want to check William Sargent out, just so notorious for mind control. Just go.
Was he the one at the Maudsley? William Sargent, or
I think no, it might have been initially. No, he was in a London hospital. I can't remember the name of it.
Well, that isn't Maudsley's in London, isn't it?
Yeah, but I don't think it was
a different one.
No.
A different one.
Yeah, right. I think it was actually a National Health Service hospital. It was actually a proper, a normal. It wasn't a psychiatric hospital.
Yeah, it wasn't a nut house. It was an NHS nut house.
And people have come forward and said he was putting them in deep sleep for days on end, and they'd lost their memories and they couldn't remember what their name was. And Celia Imrie, the actress, the British actress, she wrote about it in her autobiography. I think you can find it online. Wow. There's an article where she claims that she was sent there because she was anorexic, and for some reason they deemed that she should be put under these treatments where she was, there was sleep hypnosis going on, people being given drugs that were like hypnosis, drugs. So that's William Sargent. And the other guy that was part of this alleged MK Ultra operation was Emmanuel Miller, a Tavistock supported psychiatrist, father of Jonathan Miller of Beyond the Fringe. So it just goes around and around itself. It's like a snake that's eating itself, It just goes around and around. And I could go on with this forever.
Yeah.
There's other,
There's so much information once you start digging. And that's why lunatics like me and you, Matt, we get excited about that. You see a thread and you pull it, and all of a sudden you think, fucking hell. And you're just in, aren't you? And 3 hours goes by, and my missus is shouting me saying, are you coming up here to...
Oh, stay down there.
My missus said to me, and you think that and Chris, you think that as well sometimes as well.
Yeah.
My missus said to me today, she phoned me, she goes, are you going to come and pick me up from work? I says, yeah. Are you still doing that thing with that podcast people? Are you still doing the thing with that podcast people? They've got names, They do have names,
Them twats. Them Yorkshire twats, yeah. I do have to...
I mean, it sounds heartless, it sounds heartless, but I do get a buzz when I find little links like that. Even though we're looking at deeply dark, sick, twisted, evil...
individuals and groups,
and groups and agendas, I still get a buzz when I find a link, like the ones I've been explaining.
One of the things I found yesterday, which was interesting, that a lot of the ancestors of Lennon, the barons and stuff like that, all fought against the royal narrative. A lot of them were ostracized, some of them were killed, some of them had to escape to France and live in France. So a lot of his ancestors, who were Sir such and such or Duke of such and such, all fought against the royal family. Which, when you look at Lennon's life, which was anarchy or whatever you want to call it, the rebel.
Some people might say that he was just put there to be kind of like limited hangout. That maybe he wasn't. That he was. He came across as this guy that was fighting against the man, against the establishment. But maybe he was a limited hangout. Maybe he was put there to lead people down the cul-de-sac.
Or maybe he was a person whose control was, they couldn't control him as much as they used to be able to. It was breaking.
Yeah, maybe the mind control program. Maybe the program was malfunctioning. Maybe he did start out willingly to, or maybe not willingly, maybe through some kind of control program to social engineer the 1960s. And then, maybe somewhere along the line, he just thought, I don't want to do this anymore. What the hell's going on? And he just, malfunctioned or whatever, broke free or tried to break free, didn't quite make it, and ended up dead, lying flat down in an office somewhere.
You would say the two nicer Beatles are the two people that you could actually relate to if you needed to, whether they are part of a control part of it or not, are the ones that died, aren't they?
Yeah, and there's just so much about George Harrison. You could make a podcast on that. There's an article on my website which I put up on the anniversary of his death a few years back. If anyone wants to go take a look at that, because no one ever looks at his death. I don't. When George Harrison died of cancer, but throughout the years, whenever I think of George Harrison and him dying, passing away, I don't equate it to cancer. Every time I think of George Harrison, I think to myself, George Harrison died. Yeah, he was assassinated. And I think, wait a minute, no, he wasn't. He died of cancer. But I having looked into the way because his home was raided about 2 or 3 years before he died. This nutter, again, this crazed lone nutter, managed to break through his super to quote some people who knew where he lived, this great big mansion which was like quote unquote Fort Knox. This one lone lunatic, this guy in his early 20s, managed to break through Fort Knox and go into Harrison's stately mansion and stab him and nearly kill him. How that happened, how the hell did he get through all the security, the alarms and the security guards and the electric fencing and all of that? How the hell did he get through all that, run across these acres of land into the house, get through into the house? But yeah, so I always equate what happened that night, the stabbing, to him actually dying. I don't equate it to cancer. I look at that knife incident and then him dying of cancer years later. I kind of link the two together, that if that hadn't happened that night, then he wouldn't have died of cancer when he did. It's because I've spoken to a couple of professors actually on personal terms about cancer, and what they've said to me is, if you cancer, and you probably know this yourself, it's trauma. Yeah,
trauma can trigger it. Yeah,
Weaponized cancer. If you got what was inserted into his body, can it?
Yeah, what was in the knife? What was on the knife?
How does a guy get into a guy who's already paranoid? Why is he so paranoid? And if with all that money and all that security, how does someone get through that?
Get through it? Yeah, someone who was in a local nut house manages to.
I always thought Ringo were weird. Do you think Ringo were thrown in there as a handler of some kind? I don't know. I never trusted him with those dark glasses on. And when you watch that old, like I said, I've never been a Beatles fan. I don't know why. But when you watch that old footage, you were clearly put in as like this clown character.
Yeah.
And it was so obvious. He was like fanning around, as like this.
Well, there are people. There's a theory that the reason he wears those dark glasses is because it's a double. Because if you look at his eyes, there's one Ringo with one. There's two Ringos, and each of them has got different coloured eyes.
Right.
So that's why he's wearing the dark glasses, so you can't see his eye colour, the colour of his eyes.
I don't trust anyone who wears dark glasses inside.
Yeah, that was the one thing with the Asher genealogy, wasn't it? I seem to remember now, coming off the top of my head, that Sodor was one of the islands where her ancestors ruled, and Sodor was the mythical island on Thomas the Tank Engine that Ringo Starr did the narration for.
Yeah. And Mull of Kintyre, didn't you find out?
Yeah, one of the kings, the ancient Scottish kings that she would directly relate to, was a king of Kintyre.
Just
again,
come on,
yeah.
Coincidence?
How does that fucking work?
Yeah, yeah. This is something that's got to be put out there.
It's gems like that actually knee rubbers like us get ourselves unbothered about.
When you think about
sorry, wife, it's not Valentine's Day, but
you think about Ringo Starr. Think about Ringo Starr doing Thomas the Tank Engine. Is that literally like just a cash cow? They could have paid him anything they wanted to do that. Why? Because I remember Thomas, that. Yeah, I remember it being in the news and stuff. Ringo Starr's doing Thomas the Tank Engine. But I always think of actors when they do cartoons. You think, why would you do that as a seasoned actor? But it's a cash cow, isn't it? Because they're bigger than their actual live action films. And imagine for an actor, what a piece of piss it would be to sit in a booth and.
I actually think it was one of the first times people took him seriously. How mad's that?
I mean, it could be argued that he might have needed the money. Think about it. I mean, Ringo Starr, how many songs did he actually write, if he wrote any?
But what I mean is, Matt, it's a good way to reward someone, because you can pay them whatever you want. Maybe that was his reward.
But again, you don't know what the messaging is in that thing. It's played to children. You don't know what the program is in there. You don't know the reasons why that program.
Should we all go and watch Thomas Tank Engine? Tune in next week.
That came out the same year that the Frog Chorus, McCartney did the Frog Chorus. So you've got two Beatles doing kiddie type things, because the Frog Chorus was connected to the Rupert Bear animated short.
And the bear thing is obviously that's an MK Ultra thing, isn't it? The teddy bear thing.
Yeah, the teddy bear. Yeah. And I've looked into the Frog Chorus, and it does. It links to an ancient.
That's surprised, Matt.
I've looked into the Frog Chorus.
Yeah, I didn't look. Well, okay, maybe I should rephrase that, because I am really sounding really sad and dejected now. But
it's not sad to us, mate.
I stumbled.
It's not sad to us at all.
I stumbled down a rabbit hole, which took me down. Yeah, I was looking at
frog over a lily pad.
Lily pad. I fell off the lily pad, and splashed into the waters of conspiracy. And underneath those waters, I was looking at ancient Egyptian symbology connected to McCartney and Lennon, and it turns out that the frog princesses that you see in the video at the end of the pop song "We All Stand Together," where the two frog king and queen come out of the water and they're towering figures. There's actual ancient Egyptian god there's an ancient Egyptian god who looks exactly the same as those king and queens that come out of the water, with robes and a rod,
Very
a
vaguely
staff.
remember it, I've seen it since I was a kid.
So
I'm sure people will be going and watching it now.
So people are wondering what the hell is he doing putting frogs in a song and in a video? Because anyone who remembers Rupert the Bear, the books and the animated series, if I'm not mistaken, there's no frogs.
Nothing
in
to do
it.
with frogs. Yeah.
Nothing to do with frogs. But all of a sudden, in this animated short,
I used to cry when Rupert Bear finished. So my mum told me anyway. Yeah. Yeah, I used to cry. As soon as that music started, I used to cry.
So you've got all those regular cast of characters that are in all the Rupert the Bear stories, the elephant and the mouse or whatever it is. I can't remember.
Christian's got his trousers on. He wears them yellow trousers.
Yes, told me I dressed like Rupert the Bear before.
Yeah.
Like my trousers.
Yeah.
But in this frog chorus thing, in this animated short, his side characters are hardly in it. You blink and you miss them, and it's all about frogs. But you think, what the hell is this all about? What's this fascination with frogs? And it just, there is this ancient Egyptian deity that looks exactly like those two, that king and queen frogs that come out of the water at the end of "We All Stand Together," the frog chorus song. That look exactly the same as that ancient Egyptian.
So before we go, because we're up to 2.5 hours.
But I'm sure you've covered that though, Matt. The beetle is the Egyptian.
Yeah,
scarab.
exactly. The ancient
and then
Egyptian.
He becomes wings, which is the winged beetle. Which is the Egyptian scarab.
Yeah. What got you into the occult Beatles? Because from being a fan for all those years, all of a sudden, I was going to ask you this right at the beginning, but anyway,
Must have been devastating, by the way.
Not really, no.
No,
it wasn't devastating at all. No, not really. Because I am a fan, but I'm not a kind of a fan who says
you got over your hero worshipping.
Yeah, I'm not hero worshipping. I'm not going to go and buy the latest box set. I'm not going to buy the Beatles T-shirt, every Beatles piece of memorabilia that comes out. I'm not one of those kind of fans, that has to have every T-shirt, every box set.
Birthday cards.
Yeah, and that was bought by my missus, not me. I have to reiterate. So yeah, and McCartney, whichever one it is appearing in concert as we speak in the UK for the first time since 2-3 years.
Really? Is he still touring? Is it?
God, is he? Is he ever? He doesn't stop. He doesn't stop.
See, that's something that makes me. I mean, is it for the love of it, or is it, you're just being pushed out by some broom to perform one more time?
Performing monkey, performing frog. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that the contract that they signed when they're 18, 16, whatever?
But I don't want to go and see it. So I'm not a fan of fans in that respect. I'm not interested. I don't care.
Big concerts are fucking garbage anyway.
I hate it. I saw him in '89, and that was enough. Yeah. That's it. I don't want to see him because his voice is shot to bits anyway. He can hardly sing now. He's an 82-year-old man who hasn't looked after his voice very well, and it's shit. If you hear him live in concert now, he's shit. He's absolute fucking shit.
I don't know. He sung at White House for Obama.
Didn't he do that? He did Ebony and Ivory with Stevie Wonder.
Yeah.
Didn't he? And that was actually okay because he had Stevie Wonder singing it with him and he had to up his game. And if you watch McCartney, he starts a bit croaky with his voice. But when Stevie kicks in, McCartney harmonises with him, or whoever it is, McCartney or not McCartney. And he ups his game and he actually gets in harmony with Stevie, and it actually turns out to be all right.
But also, that were in the 80s. He still had his voice then, didn't he?
Yeah, he did in the 80s, but slowly. But yeah, so the reason I got into it is because I just got into looking at the world of conspiracy, and it's only natural if you're going to look at things like 9/11 and things that are going on day by day in the news, whether it's geopolitical or things going on where you live in your country. It's only natural that at some point you're going to start looking at the occult, conspiratorial in music, isn't it? It's just a natural.
Not to most people, I don't think, Matt.
I will say it.
Well, it is if you're a DJ and you love music. Okay, I should rephrase that. Yeah, okay, I'll rephrase it.
Yeah.
Having been a DJ and a music nut all my life, it's only natural that I would then go and take a look at the music
Matt,
side of it.
Once I was having beers with my mate, we're around his house, and we stayed up really late, and we were drinking away or whatever. And he were on about the Beatles because his dad's a massive Beatles fan, and he's also a Beatles fan. And I said, I'm not into Beatles. And he said, and he put some Beatles on. I don't know what it was. And we just had it on while we were chatting in the background. The next day, for an entire day, I wasn't particularly listening or anything. I could not get the songs out of my head. They were rattling around my head for days. I mean days, like, just the trips and the choruses and the and the bangers, if you like. I couldn't get them out of my head, and I had no interest in.
Has to be an improvement on normal shite that goes around your head.
Thanks for that. That's up there. That is fire.
Yeah.
Shite that's normally going around your head. That's fucking up there. That we most cold-hearted, horrible insults.
Did it top the
limp-wristed, arty-farty fucker? Over it. Yeah.
You soft southern bastard.
Yeah.
You've got two soft southern bastards tonight.
Yeah. All right, well, shall we wrap up there and save some for next time?
Positive note.
Yeah, on that positive note of abuse to my younger brother.
Better than shite that's usually knocking around your head.
All right, we didn't quite hit 4 hours, but we could have done if we'd wanted to.
How long have we been going? Just
2.5 hours.
2.5-ish, yeah. 2.5.
Okay.
Just a breath, really, isn't it? Yeah. Really.
It's just a mere cough.
Yeah. Do you know the worrying thing, right? Because you're a guest on here, and we've sort of listened to your work on here, if you like. Imagine if I were listening, we were both me and you doing it.
Well, I know. I've thought of that every now and again. If we did something together, fucking hell, yeah. I know, but it's fun. It's a fun prospect.
Yeah.
You don't have to like. If we did do something together, we wouldn't have to do it all in one.
No. You just do it in little segments,
like your Huxley thing that you guys did. You just do it in blocks.
Yeah, blocks where
3-hour blocks.
Yeah. They were going to be
blocks. Yeah, just wafer thin. Wafer thin blocks.
They were going to be 3. I thought I better cover this in 2 or 3 podcasts. Yeah.
Every episode got split into 6.
Yeah. I'm writing a book, Matt, right? And it was overwhelming me because of all the information. You'd be saying, you'll have thought, I'll write a book.
Yeah,
all the information the information you've got, it overwhelmed me. So I thought, right, I'll break it down into 2020/21 when I were doing the work on Chris Whitty, Boris Johnson, the yada. So I got all that together and I thought, right, I'll start writing it. So I started on Boris Johnson because he was the main guy at that point. And it overwhelmed me again. And I thought, fucking hell, there's probably 3 books here. So in that one year...
Totally know what you mean, because I want to write a book about the 60s counterculture of London, because from a conspiratorial angle, obviously.
Yeah.
We've had McGowan with the scenes of Laurel Canyon. I want to do a kind of a version about London. Yeah. And I started researching this in 2016, and I'm still researching it because it's never ending. You just keep finding more and more links and more. Yeah. And on top of that, I've also got my site, The Occult Beatles. I'm writing articles for that. I'm doing podcasts and videos for that. Also, Conspiro Media, the site. Also doing all these kind of things I'm doing with you guys. So when do you find the time in between writing these articles and researching for this and researching for that to turn your attention to a book, which in terms of research is still churning out more and more information on a daily basis? It's maybe so difficult. I mean, and living a normal life and having a normal life on top of it.
Of course, we're just normal.
Yeah, normal. Quote unquote.
But anyway, there you go. All right, then we'll wrap up now. I'll give you a couple of weeks off, Chris, from the abuse. You better recover. Maybe drown your sorrows.
Need it after talking to me.
Yeah, drown your sorrows in 200 bottles of witch piss over the next 10 days.
Yeah, there is that. Yeah.
All right, then we'll see you later. Bye.
Bye.